Hello everyone, welcome back into another stream of Last Protagonist reacting to a bunch of videos, some lore, some not. Hope you're doing well. Alright, on yesterday's episode, we checked out Level T's Nito and Godwin comparisons, then Storm King's, the Nox are the missing link to the Elden Ring's timeline, followed with Nick's Tales, the forbidden science of Elden Ring and Bloodborne Elden Ring lore. So today we have another video queued up for us with Storm King's The Night of the Black Knives, a double betrayal, because I meant to watch that before the other Storm King video yesterday, but I goofed. So after that we have Sinclair Lore's Shadow of the Erdtree review and discussion with Saint Trina. So I think this should last us the whole time. We might have a little bit of free time toward the end, so I might queue up another small thing, maybe something by Zoli if we have that excess amount of time. So anyway, Captini, Without Horns, Whitey, Asnex, Elden Enthusiast, welcome back in, everybody. We're getting right into it, exactly. Okay, so speaking of getting right into it, whoops, I didn't mean to click that. Let's go ahead and dive on into The Night of the Black Knives was a double betrayal by the Storm King. Not to be confused with the Storm Lord. And Sexy Alex, welcome back in.
The world has grown crooked, and if you intend to put it to rights, you'd better understand what happened to make it this way.
The Night of Black Knives is the most pivotal moment in the story of Elden Ring, the inciting incident of the Shattering, which marked Marika's fall and the collapse of the Golden Order. Due to the importance of this event, it is explained in depth through Ranni and Rogier's questlines. But there are some strange details surrounding this event that have bothered me since I first played the game. Why would the Black Knife assassins, who received their god-slaying weapons from Ranni, organize an assault on Caria Manor in an attempt to kill her and her followers after she reveals her intentions to slay her two fingers at the end of her questline? There's also the profoundly important description of the Black Knife armor, which states that the assassins are both scions of the Eternal City and all Newman women with close ties to Marika herself.
And to be fair, those are both rumors, if I remember correctly.
There's also an interesting piece of dialogue from the finger reader in Deeproot Depths, who laments,
"Oh, Lord Godwin. Oh, my poor sweet lordling should have died a true death, as a martyr to destined death."
What would it have meant to be a martyr for destined death? Finally, Marika is stated to have betrayed Maliketh, but what was the nature of this betrayal? There's a deeper secret to the Night of Black Knives, one that can explain all of these mysteries. I believe that on that fateful night, the Black Knife assassins were acting upon Marika's orders, and that the Queen of the Erdtree wanted her son to die, a true death. But Marika's plan backfired when she was betrayed by her co-conspirator, Lunar Princess Ranni, when she performed a ritual at the moment of Godwin's death.
So I just double-checked the dialogue about the finger reader crone saying that Godwin should have died as a martyr to destined death. Generally, I think it's fine. Martyr might have some extra religious connotations to show that he becomes a symbol for something, like a bigger movement, I guess. Whereas the Japanese is a little bit more muted in that it's just kind of meant in the lines of being, like... No, it does mean to die as a martyr. Let me consult the native dictionary. I'm going to double check. There might be some nuance here. Thought it was fine. That does not help. All right, yeah, so it seems fine. And then Iman, welcome back in.
An answer to one of the most important mysteries in the lore. Why Marika shattered the Elden Ring, plunging the lands into chaos.
Okay, looking at the native dictionary, there might be a little bit of a nuance difference. I don't think this is necessarily meant to be this first definition I don't think is meant to be relevant to the Godwin one. So the first definition means to follow, as in follow one's lord into death specifically. So in pre-modern Japanese times, if you had a feudal lord of a land who was killed, it's kind of customary for his samurai retainers to follow him into death. Kind of like how pharaohs would have some of their servants follow them into death. It was done to kind of pacify any ideas of follow-on retributive rebellions and stuff like that. Pretty relevant movie choice would be something like the 47 Ronin. That got remade. I don't know about the remake, but anyway. Then the second definition for it is to offer oneself up for a specific purpose, and that can kind of mean martyrdom in a broader sense. So I think what the Finger Reader Code is trying to get at is that Godwin should have surrendered himself to destined death, and the implication is that he hasn't, which is kind of why he exists as a fishman bastard thing. He's not truly dead, which, I mean, is pretty much more or less what the English implies, but just wanted to give you guys some more context. And Storm King, welcome back into the stream. Nice to have you again. How you doing tonight? Good choice of music, though. The Knight of Black Knives.
To understand the truth, we must first answer why Marika might have desired the death of Godwin the Golden. While Marika as a character is deeply mysterious, there's a clear shift in the way she is characterized throughout the game's timeline, which we learn of through Melina, who recounts Marika's words in the various churches scattered throughout the lands.
All right, so what he asks, does Godwin cling to his corpse yet? That's metal as hell. So I'm going to say technically no, because it's arguable that which is Godwin exists no longer, and pretty much what's left is a soulless husk. So if the individuality of a being pertains to their soul, then that has been wiped clean. And that's probably the biggest difference between... I was struggling to figure out how to articulate that to name the singer. So anyway, Godwin, for all intents and purposes, is gone, and what's left is a... I don't want to say unidentifiable, like a non-individual... What's the word that I'm trying to think of? An inanimate thing. Although it's more like an animate thing, because it's technically alive in a way, and it continues to grow. But anyway, Godwin gone.
Spoken echoes linger here. Words of Queen Marika, who vanished long ago. If you wish, I will share them with you.
In the earliest days, when the Order was first established, Marika was ruthless, a conqueror, believing fully in her new order.
Put the giants to the sword and confine the flame atop the mount. Let a new epoch begin, an epoch glistening with life.
But eventually, it seems, she came to harbor doubts about the Golden Order.
In Marika's own words, I declare mine intent to search the depths of the Golden Order through understanding of the proper way. Our faith, our grace is increased. Those blissful early days of blind belief are long past. My comrades, why must ye falter?
Something shook Marika and made her begin to question her order.
Hey, Mercy and Meowlaser, welcome back in. His soulless husk clings to his corpse. His soulless husk is his corpse. They're the soulless bones that the Castle Soul guy references. So, yeah, good luck with your 4 honor duels, Mercy. So going back to the idea of Marika doubting her order, Yes, I think there's a little bit of a caveat to bring to the table here, and this part is open to interpretation. Many people believe the Golden Order fundamentalist starts kind of early in the timeline, or we should just say Golden Order in general. And I'm of the opinion that the Golden Order begins later in the timeline with the incarnation of Golden Order fundamentalism. Now, other people believe because it's fundamentalism, it must mean that they're examining something which exists. I definitely understand and appreciate that argument, but I just kind of disagree within the broader context of the game. So, long story short, Marika expressing doubt here, I wouldn't necessarily phrase it quite that way in relation to how I view the timeline. So the way that I look at things is that the Age of Plenty was coming to a close and the blessings of the Erdtree were starting to wane, and that caused Marika to perhaps have an existential crisis, which she needed to take a new step in a different direction to kind of keep the blessings going indefinitely. And so that's why I think she turned to what would go on to become Golden Order fundamentalism. So I think Marika's proclamation to study the Golden Order is her intent to study a new way of being, because why else would her comrades falter if she was going to take a deeper look at the Order, which she herself controls? I think this is her saying, hey guys, things are going to start changing around here, and things are going to be different rather than we're going to refine what we already have, even though that still kind of might be true to an extent. Meow Laser asks, aren't fundamentalists usually religious extremists? Nowadays that might be kind of more accurate. It just depends on what you mean by extremist. So a fundamentalist is one who will follow the religious doctrines perhaps a little bit literally, whether it's good or bad. Well, in their eyes it wouldn't be bad. They try to take things at a fundamental level and apply the basics of their core tenets to their everyday life and fulfill them to the greatest potential possible. And whether or not they're successful, that is of course a matter for debate, and that truly does change between religions and everything like that.
I believe what caused this shift was the end of the Age of Plenty. We discussed why the Age of Plenty ended, and the flaws within the Golden Order in detail in my video on the original sin, but the important takeaways are this. Marika sealed the Rune of Death upon the Golden Order's inception, making it so that her followers would be granted extended life through grace after consuming the Erdtree's sap, which contains runes. The Erdtree is a crucible tree which absorbs the runic life force of the dead, and the age of conquest and war during Godfrey's reign kept the Erdtree well fed, allowing its sap to continue to pour.
And I kind of agree with that premise there, with feeding the Erdtree with the remnants of those conquered and whatnot.
That is, until the Golden Order became absolute, and an era of peace was ushered in, ending the Age of Plenty. The original sin was the creation of an order which broke the normal cycle of life and death. After the Erdtree stopped producing sap,
it's kind of hard to approach this topic because it's so nebulous with what we're told in the game. We're told that the original sin has to do with burning the Erdtree, like that is the first cardinal sin. And then we're also told that the original sin is sealed away in the Shadowlands along with Mesmer to an extent. So perhaps the Skadu tree was the original Erdtree and it got burned. That's one interpretation. Let me double check the cardinal sin thing. Maybe it doesn't say first cardinal sin. Oh, no, that's exactly what Nia says. The burning of the Erdtree is the first cardinal sin, and you say you seek the power of the Rune of Death too? Let me double check. Yeah, Saisho no Taizai, or Gensho no Taizai. That is definitely like the original sin, but not in the biblical context. So it is also stated to be that way in Fire's Deadly Sin. The English has it in quotation marks. The Japanese does not. But it is kind of clear from context that it'd be a quote, because the way that the Japanese is written is in more spoken text rather than like written literary text there. I forgot the Candle Tree Shield called it a prophecy of cardinal sin. Man, I haven't thought about the candle tree in a while. Oh man, there's even like another tree. Spiral tree, candle tree. Maybe the spiral tree is a candle tree. Anyway. Okay.
Sap, Marika wished to investigate the depths of the Golden Order in an attempt to determine how it might be set to rights. However, by this point, the religion of the Erdtree had become more about blind faith. Ironically, one of the leaders of this religious fundamentalist movement was her own other self, Radagon, whose characterization seems to represent Marika's initial absolute belief in the Golden Order.
My comrades, why must ye falter?
The fact that she seems to be imploring in vain to her comrades to search the Order seems to show that it was too late for change. The fundamentalism of the religion was too deep, and nobody was willing to question the Order, even for its own god. For we learn in the DLC, godhood is a prison. So instead, Marika was forced to plot in secret. There are many moving pieces to Marika's plan, which we'll discuss in future videos. For example, the banishment of Godfrey and the Tarnished, or this dialogue where she speaks to her children.
Hear me, demigods. My children, beloved, make of thyselves that which ye desire. Be it a lord, be it a god.
I definitely appreciate the use of Saint Trina's theme here in conjunction with this quote. Bro, Saint Trina's theme is just really, really good for like from soft music. Like there's a lot of ambient music which is very ambient in nature, and then that one's actually like one to just like stop and listen to and appreciate, in my opinion. So yeah, anyway, just wanted to comment on that. And welcome back in, Chungus Toad. How you doing tonight? I disagree, Elden, but it's fine. Like it would not surprise me if Kitamura did not do that one. There are a couple tracks that I do really like Kaled by Kitamura, but generally I'm not as big a fan as many others. And then True Connoisseur, welcome back in.
Should ye fail to become aught at all, ye will be forsaken, amounting only to sacrifices.
But the important takeaway for this theory is that Marika realized that the Golden Order was flawed, but her comrades opposed her wish to try and fix it, so she orchestrated plans in order to bring about the change she desired. As I have already stated, the biggest flaw within the Golden Order was the sealing of destined death. In my eyes, this is one of the main reasons Marika's plan for the Tarnish revolved around sacrificing a Finger Maiden to the Flame of Ruin, leading them to the Rune of Death.
The one who walks alongside flame shall one day meet the road of destined death.
She realized that an order of life without death was doomed to fail, causing an endless period of stagnancy which would wither away to eternity. And so, somehow, destined death had to be returned to the land. There was only one problem: Malekith, the Black Blade, the death of the demigods, and the wielder of the Rune of Death. Marika's shadow was not to be trifled with, and his purpose was to keep death sealed, and to end all of those who wished to unleash its power. If Malekith could bring death to the demigods, he may have even been a threat to Marika herself. Malekith was a shadow-bound beast given to his Empyrean. Marika's sole need of her shadow was as a vessel to lock away destined death. Even then, she betrayed him. I believe this betrayal was Marika's involvement in the Night of Black Knives, but to understand why, we must first speak of the assassins who committed the deed. Scale armor used by the Black Knife assassins, forged to make no sound. The assassins that carried out the deeds of the Knight of Black Knives were all women, and rumored to be Newman, who had close ties to Marika herself. This is a pretty huge red herring, and not the kind of detail that gets included by accident. There's also the fact that Melina, who is the daughter of Marika, fights in the same style as the Black Knives. There is also an assassin posted outside of Marika's bedchamber, who based on her relaxed, seated position seems to be guarding the room as opposed to being there for any sinister purpose. For these reasons, I believe that before Godwin's death, the Black Knives may have served as Marika's personal assassins. An important thing to note is that the Black Knives are described as scions, or in the Japanese, descendants of the Eternal Cities, as opposed to being Nox themselves. This is an important
scion even in English can mean descendant, but
important detail. Previously, the lore community has assumed that the Black Knives agreed to kill Godwin because they, being tied to the Nox, wanted to strike a blow against the Greater Will. But if this was the case, then it would not make any sense why the Black Knives then attacked Ranni's followers when she goes to slay her two fingers, which is fully in line with the goals of the Nox. Instead, if we view
to be fair, she kind of does steal their civilization's greatest treasure as well as potentially like the greatest object of sin. And we could come up with a bunch of theories as to why they would have a retaliatory strike against her. Maybe they continue to fear active punishment by the Greater Will if the symbol of their punishment was just kind of stolen out from under their noses. Maybe the Greater Will wouldn't look too kindly upon that. Maybe, and I'm sure Storm King will get into it later, maybe there was like a double crossing and Ranni came out on top because she played both sides. So I just wish we had more information about pretty much every character's motivation in the game. And Weddy, could you elaborate on what you just said right there?
the assassins as descendants of the Nox,
And then Mendacious Cat, welcome back into the stream. How you doing?
the goals of the Nox.
And Jameson Ferdinand, welcome back in.
Instead, if we view the assassins as descendants of the Nox, who instead have allegiance to Marika, everything comes together. Their lineage tracing back to the Eternal Cities explains why they are an order solely of women, as the Nox are a matriarchal society with the Night Maidens holding the highest religious rank. It also explains where they gained their invisibility magic, which is tied to the town of Celia, home of the sorceress assassins which hunted their fellows. Their allegiance to Marika.
I'm a little bit confused on that point because it makes it sound as though the Black Knife assassin specifically. Okay. No, I'm fine. I get that. So to reiterate his point, hopefully, the Nox are their own people, their own group, blah blah blah. They may or may not have invisibility stuff, but the Celians are the descendants of the Nox, and they do have invisibility stuff. We know. He is saying that these guys are also, or these gals rather, are potentially descendants of the Nox, and they may or may not have gotten their invisibility stuff from the Celians. The point is there isn't like a potential degree of separation of these gals from the Celians.
Invisibility magic, which is tied to the town of Celia, home of the sorceress assassins which hunted their fellows. Their allegiance to Marika explains why their actions in the story seem to go against the goals of the Nox. So, now that we have established Marika's connection to the Black Knives and her desire to return death to the world, the next question we must address is how Godwin's death might have furthered this goal. As the voices of the two fingers, finger readers are said to live lives eternal, and one is even supposed to have served as a wet nurse to royalty. This wet nurse could have been the finger reader in Deeproot Depths. So, with that in mind, this dialogue is a bit strange.
Yes, so within the internal files at the very least, which is a little bit unfortunate to do, lore sleuthing through things beyond just the base form of the game, she's called the finger reader crone wet nurse or something like that. She's called the wet nurse. at the very least. So Godwin suckled from her teat when he was a wee one, is the takeaway.
Oh, Lord Godwin. Such cruelty. Such humiliation. Oh, my poor sweet lordling should have died a true death. As the first of the demigods to die. As a martyr to destined death. But why must it yet bring such disgrace? A scion of the Golden Bough, sentenced to live in death. How could such a thing come to be?
She doesn't seem to be lamenting the fact that Godwin died, more so the fact that he did not die a true death. She even says he should have died. Well, this doesn't necessarily mean that she knows he was meant to die, as she could be saying that since he was murdered, it should have been a true death. It still does beg the question, what would being a martyr to destined death mean? Curse mark carved into the discarded flesh of Ranni the Witch, also known as the half-wheel wound of the centipede. This curse mark was carved at the moment of death of the first demigod, and should have taken the shape of a circle. However, 2 demigods perished at the same time, breaking the curse mark into 2 half-wheels. Ranni was the first of the demigods whose flesh perished, while the Prince of Death perished in soul alone. This is what caused Godwin to live in death, a living body without a soul, spreading his fate throughout the lands between through the roots of the Erdtree, giving rise to those who live in death. The wording here is
So Mendacious Cat asks, shouldn't the releasing of Destined Death after killing Malekith affect Godwin in some way? And I replied in the chat, maybe, maybe not, ghost emoji, because while the Rune of Death does get released, one of the biggest issues perhaps is that it's not the full Rune of Death, and the Rune of Death that existed within Godwin seems to have taken on a quote-unquote new life by transforming itself into Deathlight. So that's not good, but good question. Long story short, we don't know.
extremely important. The curse mark should have taken the shape of a circle. Godwin should have died a true death. There's a clear implication here that Ranni's ritual was not part of the plan. She betrayed the Black Knives, and by extent, Marika. The Mending Rune of the Death Prince states, rune gestated by Fia, the deathbed companion. Formed of two Halbrand half-wheels combined, it will embed the principle of life within death into the Order. The Golden Order was created by confining destined death. Thus, this new order will be one of death restored. An important
And there are some... Hold on.
thing to note is that Fia needs to grant Godwin a
Okay, so there are a couple discrepancies with that description in particular, which is kind of unfortunate. The verb confining is different in the Japanese, because confining can be understood as sealing the Rune of Death, which may or may not be different than what had actually happened. So the Golden Order began by plucking or removing the Rune of Death from the Elden Ring, and sealing the Rune of Death may be an entirely separate action performed by Malekith after the Rune of Death was already removed. And technically, we don't actually know when the Rune of Death was quote-unquote sealed. It may have only been properly sealed after Ranni stole a fragment of the Rune of Death on the Night of Black Knives, and when Malekith swore to let nobody steal death away from him again, which is really fun to consider. So, in many ways, it would make a lot of sense that the Rune of Death wasn't properly sealed away if Ranni was able to steal a chunk of it, although we don't exactly know what Ranni and Rykard and the Black Knife Assassins did for Ranni to steal a chunk of the Rune of Death to begin with anyway, so there might not be any contradictions, but I just wanted to bring that up because the English kind of forces a more limited perspective on the sequence of events there. And then Hilko, welcome back in. Elden, you think the shape of the mending rune is related to the eclipse, and that could be why it warded away destined death? That's an interesting point as well. I do think that there might be some more thematic connections between destined death and the sun and stuff. And I've got some pretty broader thoughts about destined death and the difference between the epochs of the Erdtree that I'll probably talk about toward the end of the video, but right. And then Mendacious Cat was saying that there was a ritual also implies that Ranni knew a full circle curse mark would cause a complete death. I don't know what Ranni knew, whether or not she truly intended to kill herself along with Godwin. I'm really annoyed that we're told that Ranni and Godwin died at the same time, but we don't ostensibly see Ranni stabbing Godwin in the back or being stabbed in the back at the same time as Godwin in either the promotional trailer or even like the promotional artwork that plays at the very beginning of the game. We need a rune of destined parries. And Chadwick, welcome back in. Man, you wonder if Ranni could be the Glowmide Queen. I know that theory came up quite a bit. I think there was a lot of reasons to think that it would not be her, timeline-wise, but I'm struggling to think of them off the top of my head. Obviously, you have the whole Godskin Noble type stuff, and why you would have the Godskins being more similar to the Crucible, which might work in favor of my earlier interpretations about the Crucible being the Erdtree, but I really don't want to get into that right now, to be honest. And I think that's probably a big part of it.
A true death in order for this rune to come into being. Essentially, Fia is completing the ritual as it was originally intended, combining the curse marks and...
Oh yeah, because the biggest issue is we're told that the Glowmide Queen was defeated by Malekith, and then the power of the Black Flame was lost. So, like, the latest that the Glowmide Queen could possibly be around is when Radagon ascends to Elden Lord, and then she has to be done by then. Because at the very least, we know for a fact that Golden Order fundamentalism exists there, which means the Golden Order definitely does. But there is still some ambiguity as to whether or not the Age of Plenty and the Erdtree worship epochs are technically of the Golden Order or not.
Killing Godwin's body, granting him a true death. Ironically, just as Marika was opposed by her comrades who refused to question the Golden Order, the fundamentalist hunters view Fia as a reviled witch, despite the fact she is the only one actively working to stop the spread of Deathroot by killing Godwin fully. But because she also wishes for those who live in death to be spared the Order's wrath, she is hunted. How easy it is for the learning and learnedness to be reduced to the ravings of fanatics. All the good and the great ever wanted in their foolishness was an absolute evil to contend with.
Yo mama is dead.
Marika's plan was to grant Godwin a true death with the full curse mark instead of only a half wheel. He would have died in both body and soul and given rise to a rune, which would return, at least partially, destined death back to the world. By giving him an Erdtree burial with this full rune carved into him, this rune could be integrated back into the Elden Ring within the Erdtree. The true genius of this plan is that the full rune of death would remain sealed, meaning that the Erdtree would remain eternal, and leaving the rest of the demigods and Marika herself immortal. Perhaps most importantly, Malekith would not turn on Marika, becoming a baleful shadow and a curse upon her.
I'm not sure how he came to that conclusion. I want to rewatch that part a little bit more fully.
Given rise to a rune, which would return, at least...
Hold on.
Marika's plan was to grant Godwin a true death with the full curse mark instead of only a half wheel. He would have died in both body and soul and given rise to a rune, which would return, at least partially, destined death back to the world. By giving him an Erdtree burial with this full rune carved into him, this rune could be integrated back into the Elden Ring within the Erdtree. The true...
I don't think that's a bad idea. I just don't have enough support for it for me to really believe it. Because we don't know whether or not Godwin would have gestated a rune if he was fully sacrificed to destined death, and whether or not that rune would have gone back into the Erdtree, or whether or not it would have been taken by somebody else or Marika or something like that. But yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting thought, though.
The genius of this plan is that the full rune of death would remain sealed, meaning that the Erdtree would remain eternal, and leaving the rest of the demigods and Marika herself immortal.
And see, that part I would disagree with, the full rune, so that's kind of where I was confused the first time around listening to that, because Ranni had to take a fragment of the Rune of Death to create the curse mark wheel, and that means that the Rune of Death is not at 100% after that point. So it seems as though you're making a new rune, but also keeping out an old rune, and maybe that could work in the grandest scheme of things, but it'd be nice if we had other indicators of that working out beyond just like the Tarnished kind of dying to gestate their runes. I don't know if you could forcibly kill somebody just to gestate their rune. Seems to be more of a voluntary thing, more than a voluntold, although I guess we don't know how the original Great Runes came to be. Anyway. Anyway, you have to break death to make death at that point. It's not worth it. I likes the idea that the Rune of Death is actually the Rune of the Sun. Yeah, it very well could be. And that would definitely work well with things relating to the Sun Realm and its disappearance, but you know how it be. True Connoisseur said, we're told the Black Knives are out to do a kind of demigod mass murder. And that's like one of the other stranger things to consider. It's like, if the demigods, if the, what are they called? The Black Knife Assassins knowingly did not have the full Rune of Death and then continued with the plan to begin with anyway, were they just not given the full details? I don't know, man. There just seems to be like a lot of points of failure for this inquiry, I think. Which isn't to say it's wrong, it just makes it harder for me to support.
Perhaps most importantly, Malekith would not turn on Marika, becoming a baleful shadow and a curse upon her. As to why Godwin specifically was chosen to die, I think there are a few possible reasons. Remember, Marika wanted to bring about change, and during this time he was likely one of the strongest demigods, and the most likely to unite the lands and maintain the Golden Order. Godwin's moniker as the Golden also implies he is a strong believer in the Order. In Norse mythology, which Elden Ring is heavily inspired by, Godwin most clearly fits the role of Baldur, the god of light and beauty whose murder is the catalyst for Ragnarok, or in this case,
that's right, guys. The Rune of Death is mistletoe.
The Shattering. Just as Godwin previously defeated and made peace with the dragons during their siege of Leyndell, the Shattering War may have had a very different outcome, one in which the Golden Order maintained its dominance if Godwin had still been in the picture. It's testament to Godwin's power that he was chosen to be removed from the board before the game of chess even started. So, Marika's intention for the Night of Black Knives was to return death to the world without facing Malekith's wrath, while also removing her biggest obstacle in enacting change. Her main accomplice in this plan was Lunar Princess Ranni, who was not shy about sharing her role in this event.
I see. Quite the sleuth, aren't we? Indeed, I am the witch Ranni. I stole a fragment of the Rune of...
I want to say I appreciate the effort that was used to get footage of Ranni off to the right, but using audio that's more centered. I don't know if you manually pan that, because it does feel ever so slightly to the right, but I know it'd be a lot more severe in-game, so it's something that I know will be underappreciated.
and used it to forge the god-slaying black knives through fearsome rite. I did it all.
Ranni is the one who actually stole the shard from Malekith and forged it into the weapons of Marika's assassins. But as we know, the plot did not end with a true death, and on that fateful night, the curse mark was split by Ranni so she could kill her body, severing the two fingers' control over her, so she could usher in a new age without their influence. For if the fingers guided Marika to create such a flawed order, they would surely sully any future order as well. This is why the Black Knives, despite being randomly spread throughout the lands, mobilize in force to attack Ranni when she reveals herself to the world at the end of her quest. She betrayed Marika, imprisoned their leader in an Everjail, and forced them to curse the world with Deathroot. They were given this task to mend the world, and Ranni instead caused them to break it further. If Ranni was justified in betraying Marika's plan and causing Godwin to live in death, if the ends justify the means is up for interpretation, and something we will discuss another time.
So, one quote which I think doesn't gel with this interpretation right here is the one mentioned earlier with the Saint Trina music playing over it, when Marika told her demigod children to either become gods or lords, or they'll become sacrifices. Now, to be fair, we don't actually know when Marika delivers those lines. She could have done it, for all we know, right before going to shatter the Elden Ring, and I don't think that would necessarily contradict anything with, like, the betrayal or anything, so one could make the argument that Ranni betrayed Marika, and then Marika's like, F it, we ball, do something or die, sons, and then she leaves. So, that, I just wanted to bring that up in relation to this point here. And then Dookie Stain 616, welcome back into the stream, as well as Pigsy.
One thing is clear. This is what pushed Marika over the edge. This plan was Marika's last-ditch effort to correct a flawed system, and because of Ranni's ritual, instead of returning death to the lands and revitalizing the Erdtree, and by extension, the Golden Order, Godwin's body contaminated the Erdtree's roots and spread throughout the world, causing others to live in death. A ghost near the entrance to the death-touched catacombs states, "Unthinkable. Our hallowed resting place is violated. To refuse the Erdtree's call to return, to live within death? Sickening." Causing people to live in death had precisely the opposite effect that Marika wanted. Instead of providing more energy for the Erdtree through death, this fate renders one unable to return to the Erdtree and wander the land as a corpse. Marika's betrayal of Malekith goes even further at this point when she curses him with an endless hunger for Deathroot, so he might correct her mistake and reduce its spread. He believes he is being punished for his failure, when in reality, he is being punished for Marika's.
Marika! Is this what it is to sin? Forgive me. The Golden Order cannot be restored.
Queen Marika was driven to the brink.
It was her final attempt to save the Erdtree, and it backfired spectacularly. This was the moment she accepted it was far beyond saving, and that a full upheaval, a new order, was required. So, she shattered the Elden Ring, hoping her other plans, her children or the Tarnished, would lead to something new, something better. Even while she did this, Radagon continued to oppose her plans, attempting to repair the Elden Ring and creating a wall of impenetrable thorns enchanted with his seal so that none may claim the Elden Ring, and bring about a new age. Clinging to the Golden Order despite it being far beyond saving. This is why, by the time our Tarnished receives the call to grace, the world has been stagnant for so long. The shattering war between the demigods ended without a victor, and while some came close, all of the Tarnished failed to take the mantle of Elden Lord. It is only us, a nameless tarnished of no renown, who finally managed to circumvent the thorns. Even if he was wrong to try to save the Golden Order, Radagon's opposition to change and fear of the unknown future is at least understandable. For while we can choose to make the world a better place, we can just as easily decide to burn it all to cinders. I have an exciting announcement for the channel. I have been approved for the YouTube membership program. If you're interested in supporting the channel while also receiving some cool perks, consider becoming a member. Lower tier members get to see my videos early, receive badges, and have priority comments, whereas higher tiers also gain access to my extensive Elden Ring timeline Miro board, which you're seeing right now, which I use to organize my thoughts for each video. They also allow you to request topics for future videos and share lore theories through weekly discussion posts. All members will receive a shoutout at the end of every video. If this sounds like something you might be interested in, click the join button down below. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and
Hey, congrats to Storm King on hitting that channel milestone, for real. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and share the video with you guys in chat. If you want to give Storm King some support, I'm going to go ahead and like the video as well. I think it was a good video, especially because of how tightly he was trying to focus on the narrative. And obviously, like, the things that I'm bringing up aren't necessarily meant to disagree as much as they are to provide further context for everybody to come to their own conclusions. So I think based off of the information that Storm King has, he has some pretty strong ideas here, some with more support than others. And for what it's worth, I'm kind of also of the opinion that I think it was Godwin dying and Deathblight being introduced into the world that technically pushed Marika to the brink and encouraged her to shatter the ring. I do think that there's probably a likelihood that Marika must have been complicit to some degree in that whole fiasco. And as to why she needed to get Godwin got specifically instead of Radagon is anybody's guess. Well, I guess because Radagon is her, but maybe it was a proof of concept of trying to split an individual into two different souls, or a body and a soul. So if you could have Marika's soul leave her body, then she could be freed of herself. That would be one possible interpretation of things that might explain the Ranni Godwin dualism. I've unironically wondered, and I don't mean this in a very serious sense of wonderment, whether or not Ranni could have been to Godwin what Saint Trina is to Mikola, or was to Mikola. So enjoy that thought, if you will. And then Storm King said, thanks a lot. Definitely agree there are other valid interpretations of the evidence we are shown. Yeah. So I'm not trying to impress that, like, what you're saying, you're trying to frame it as like this is the definitive thing. I think your use of language was very good, that based off of what you have, that this is kind of your interpretation of things here. You weren't saying like one thing definitively, which some other people do, which I think gives other people like impressions of the lore that are a little bit too strong, and they come away with misinformation rather than the understanding that these are just kind of general lore theories. So I'm going to give you credit for that as well. The other things that I wanted to mention, I have the notes on my screen right here, were pertaining to Malekith's betrayal and Melina in the timeline. So let's pull out the Malekith stuff up first. Okay. And this is the remembrance of Malekith. Quote, Malekith was a shadow-bound beast given to his Empyrean. Marika's sole need of her shadow was a vessel to lock away destined death. Even then, she betrayed him. So this reference to locking away destined death is actually locking away. It's not confining, or it's not removing destined death. This is like the confinement, essentially. And as I talked about this before, we don't really know when she did that. The weird thing about the Japanese is that it uses a kind of reflexive pronoun in a way, sore, which means like that. And there's a little bit of a subject-object disagreement here as to whether or not the Sore is referencing her shadow-bound beast, her shadow follower, or whether or not the betrayal of her wish for destined death to be sealed. So that might not make a lot of sense just saying it like that. So to give a broader perspective of this, and what he was talking about this in the stream earlier, but it was a little bit awkward to bring it up at that particular moment that he was going off on a tangent, is that we technically don't know what the quote-unquote betrayal of Malekith is that Marika performed. And one idea could be that she betrayed him by eventually having destined death no longer be locked away. And that could be interpreted as sending the Tarnished to kill Malekith and free it. But otherwise, it's really hard to understand what all of this could be referencing, because it could imply a grander betrayal, perhaps relating to the Night of the Black Knives, but we have very little information beyond the Black Knife set and the whole plot against the gods from Dark Souls 1. But anyway, let me pull up the chat again. Impact Player, welcome back in. Platinum Chip, nice to see you again. Elden, you think it's like how Mesmer was betrayed when the Tarnished walked in on him? I think that could be the case as well. I feel like Malekith probably may have had some inkling of what's going on. I feel like Marika probably had to work in a very roundabout way to not trigger Malekith going bail mode. Perhaps the same way that Ranni tries to use EG to lock Blythe away. And she may have even failed in the past. I wondered whether or not Malekith retaliated against Marika after she shattered the ring, and I wondered whether or not Marika split herself into Melina to avoid some of that, but there's some timeline considerations which I don't really know about, so that's actually kind of a good segue into my next point about Melina in the timeline, but let me hydrate again real quick. Okay, so I was actually thinking about this earlier today after coming off the last 2 days of streaming. So, Melina and burning the Erdtree. We're told that burning the Erdtree is the first cardinal sin. Melina is burned and bodiless. If there's a connection between them, that's fine. If there's not, that's also fine. It's just something that I think is worth broader consideration, because we kind of burn Melina to burn the Erdtree, so I think it's likely that there might have been a connection, but that does bring up some interesting timeline considerations, because if Ranni knew Melina, then that would imply that the Erdtree would have been burned after Ranni was born, so after the Carians step onto the scene, so at the very least, before the Night of Black Knives, and at the earliest, potentially when Radagon goes on to become Elden Lord. So that's kind of interesting to consider. So the bigger takeaway from that is that if Ranni knew Melina, and that's why she has the Torrent Whistle as well as the Lone Wolf Ashes, then Melina presumably wasn't burned and left bodiless at the outset of Marika's reign. And I think that's something, I don't know why I didn't really think about it in that context before, but that might be a really big clue as to some events in the timeline. And Rachel Rogers and Bloodring, welcome back in. In my head, I already welcomed you as I was hydrating, but I realized I didn't actually say it out loud. Impact Player says, what does it mean that Melina is bodiless? She clearly has a body. She means a corporeal body, so she doesn't really seem to exist in a physical sense, which is why she spectrally teleports around as a ghost. She needs to be attached to the Tarnished, because she can't seem to move around freely. The Tarnished, or maybe more accurately Torrent, I don't really know. And she's able to move around through sites of grace, it seems like, because we need to take her to Leyndell, and if she had a body, she could presumably do that herself, unless she's an Albinoric with no Lobo of her own. Storm King asks, what are my thoughts on the red spear impaling Marika and the Erdtree? Obviously alluding to Jesus, but you wonder who actually did it. It does seem like a spear of destined death, maybe. So I do think that it could be related to destined death. It's obviously got that red and black coating. I do think the iconography of Marika being in a pseudo crucified pose with a spear stabbing out of her could be reminiscent of Longinus in Jesus, or it could also be reminiscent of Odin and Sleipnir, which is another like Norse. You mentioned Baldur, so I'm sure you're familiar enough with Odin that I don't need to rehash already tread ground. But it could also be both to an extent. Like that would not surprise me at all. Like an homage to two things combined into one. So some of my unhinged thoughts are like maybe that red spear is Radagon, because as soon as Marika falls, the spear is gone, and then the next cut of the scene, we see Radagon appear with his red hair. So there's the line about Marika saying, is this what it means to sin, is also interesting because there might be some connections between Radagon and sinning and killing things and destined death and sinning in general. So if that spear of Longinus, for lack of a better term, is Radagon, and this is a big if to take a page out of Office Space's quotes, then could that kind of work in a broader sense? Maybe. I'm not fully on board with that theory. I just think it's kind of interesting to play with. I like the theory if one tends to believe that the Great Runes themselves represents the demigods, but I don't think that theory itself works for other reasons, which I tend to forget like what they are off the top of my head, but I've definitely spent the time to think about it, and it just falls apart when you really start looking into things. And then Corin, welcome back in. You said it's through her womb, which is very purposeful. It's a little bit higher than where her womb would be, bro. Corin, you don't think it's a reference to Jesus. All right, let's pull up the tape, Jamie. Marika. Damn it, because I was being a doofus. I actually typed in Marika instead of Marika. There we go. So this is pretty high up. Like her womb would be like lower down here. Like if you stabbed a pregnant woman here, which don't do that, that is not a suggestion, chat, then you might be missing or barely clipping a child, but it's way high up there. And keep in mind that she's kind of arced there, so let's look at a bit of an alternate angle. So this is lower, but it's also going up. So I think I have another angle as well. So what happens is the cutscene like has a bunch of like jump cuts within it, which is why I keep losing my camera position. Maybe it is actually going toward the boom. So it must be a little bit of a camera angle thing. It's kind of high though, like up. So here's the thing: it wouldn't be where her womb is without a child, but with a child it would be, and that's kind of like a big difference. Like she doesn't really seem to be pregante here. Hey, look, it's the letter 3. Anyway, where is that? There we go. Kid'll die either way. Doomfist, welcome back in. Man, you guys are popping off right now. Where the heck do they get the rolled medallion? Chungus said, Malekith asks what we aim to do with the Rune of Death. We fight Gideon. He says we're expected to fight forever and we can't kill a god. He who creates the Godslayer hints at real gold and that Malekith doesn't know. Yeah, I don't think Malekith was privy to Marika's inner thoughts for sure. Doomfist thinks Melina is a spirit ash that's separate from her ash, and she can enter other objects and bodies. That's kind of how I look at her as well. Impact asks, is Torrent also bodiless? I would say so, yes. I would say like all the spirit ashes are technically bodiless, and it's up until we like infuse them with some of our spirit or willpower that they can remember what it's like to be alive and then come back to life. For all we know, and this, I'm saying this somewhat facetiously, but I mean, it might be plausible enough to make you scratch your head. Melina could be the literal ash we find around Lindell, but I don't know. Chadwick in all caps, where do we keep our inventory? And what limits it at all? It's our memories, bro. It's in our head, forehead. Rachel asks, how does she call herself? I'm sorry, could you be more specific? How does Melina call herself? She just says burned and bodiless. For that reason, I yet live burned and bodiless, and the Japanese is yeah, pretty clear. Like, so she actually says she has a like body of spirit, essentially. So she has a spirit body. So that is a little bit of a liberalization on the localization, but I think within the context, it makes perfect sense. Oh, so she says she was burned to the point that it's left her into a spirit body. Am I tripping out? Oops. Okay, that's interesting. I don't know why I didn't really think about it this way. I guess I just kind of took it at more face value with the English. So, looking at the Japanese here, I'm trying to think of how to articulate this. So she's saying the purpose, she's looking for her purpose, which gives like the reason as to why she continues to exist, even though she's been burned to the point she's a spirit body. And that's like the same thing. Like her purpose is to continue to exist even though she's a spirit ghost that was burned. Damn it, I did not articulate that well. I don't even think like translating this directly would get the nuance that I'm trying to impress upon you guys. All right. So one of the weirder things of working from Japanese to English is that there can tend to be a lot of fragments in the Japanese language, and they can kind of refer to the same overall concept in a way, but it comes out across like a big old run-on sentence in English. But they can all be modifying, like these might be separate clauses that are meant to all modify this final one, but This is probably like a modifying clause to this. You wouldn't really call this a clause, but anyway. Let me catch up with you guys, and then I'll go into this in a little bit more detail. How does she summon herself as a spirit ash? That's a good question. Yeah, I agreed with Chungus Toad that all the items are memories. Maybe that's a little bit too reductive, but that is kind of like the gist of it, or what I get with the whole remembered situation. What's the difference between a spirit body and a spirit ash? So a spirit body is what you summon from spirit ashes. I don't know why Melina can kind of exist doing her own thing. She has special demigod powers because she envisioned flame. Who knows? Shoe Connoisseur thinks the grave outside the minor Erdtree church could be Melina's. Oh, wait, what was that? I just lost it. A Haiti of fire? Could you... I'm not sure what that means, El Gusto. And also, welcome back in. Spirit Ghost, totally not redundant. I'm being tongue-in-cheek when I say stuff like that. Dookie asks, if Melina is the Gek, can she do anything bodiless in her current form? She could encourage us to not become the Lord of Frenzied Flame and fail. That's what she can do. Does she ever elaborate on the turning runes into strength thing? No, she's like, hey, you can do it now. I'm not a maiden. Because she's a mother, that's why she's not a maiden. Okay, so going back to this set of dialogue, I'm just going to translate it literally here for a moment. So I don't want to go line by line because that kind of wouldn't work, so I'm going to need to skip around a little bit. So long ago... Hold on. I'm looking for the purpose, comma... that my mother gave me at or through the golden tree long ago. For the reason I continue to live, even though I'm burned to the point I've become a spirit body. Okay, that's probably good. So she says, I'm searching for my purpose given to me by my mother inside the Erdtree long ago, for the reason that I yet live burned and bodiless. So the way that I look at this in English, for the reason that I yet live burned and bodiless, that sounds like it could be independent of her purpose. So it sounds like she could be searching for two separate things, whereas in the Japanese, it sounds like this could be the same. Whoops, this could be the same thing, if that makes sense. I don't know why that's so hard to articulate. Does this... Hold on, let me think about this. I might have run into the same issue despite trying to be a little bit clearer. No, even with my localization, it doesn't really work much better than this. I think having the ... is more of a connecting force, which that's a lot of heavy lifting, I think, for an ellipsis. Does this make sense to you guys? Do you guys have any questions about this? Am I being clear? I hope I am. All right, why do you have a good night? You're kind of confused, but kind of following? Okay. So, the issue is, with the English, it sounds like Melina is searching for potentially two different things. Her purpose given to her by her mother, and she's also looking for the reason why she's still alive. Whereas in the Japanese, the reason she is still alive is because of the purpose that her mother gave her. So it seems as though she was burned for a purpose, and her purpose extends even beyond her being burned to the point that she continues to live after death. Hopefully that's a little bit clearer. And Halo of the Sun, welcome back in. I'm not sure I understand the question properly. So the only way I can reiterate things is that this is all kind of like the same thing, what she's looking for in the Japanese. That her purpose seems to be tied to being burned and bodiless. And her purpose is what also allows her to continue to exist, despite being burned and bodiless. Like, it supersedes that. And therefore, she was burned for a purpose. So she's one of those who live in death? I would argue no, because those who live in death are specifically touched by Deathroot, whereas all of the spirit ashes aren't necessarily those who live in death. Does Shibiri have the same properties as Melina? That's a really good question. I don't know, to be fair. You wonder if she chose her purpose? Toward the end, it seems as though Melina does choose her purpose, at least. So anyway, to tie all of this back into the things that came before, when I was talking about the timeline in relationship to Ranni and Melina, if Ranni knew Melina, it seems as though she knew her before she was burned, because Ranni is in the possession of the Torrent Whistle as well as the Lone Wolf Spirit Ashes. Wait. No, she doesn't give us the Torrent Whistle. She gives us the Spirit Calling Bell and the Spirit Ashes, right? Yeah, because we need Torrent to talk to Ranni. That's how she recognizes us, with Torrent through, like, Melina. So she's like, hey, you have Torrent? What the hell? I knew Torrent's master. Here, have this stuff. It belonged to Torrent's master. So if that master was Mikola from the Shadow of the Erdtree promo, which has nothing to do with anything in the damn DLC, then why does Melina have Torrent? Anyway, I was kind of going off on a sarcastic tangent there. So if Ranni presumably knew Melina, then that means that if Melina equals Erdtree burning, then Erdtree was burned after the Carians came to birth, which means it happened at least one time after Marika already began her order with Godfrey. So. Pixie, you saw it as the same thing in English? Okay. Seems like either Mick or Ranni gave her Torrent. How they even met her and knew of her is strange to begin with, though. Well, I mean, we do have Mesmer. So. Is Melina a Carian? That's a good question. We don't know. Some people assume that Mesmer would be the offspring of Marika and Radagon, but perhaps it could have been Radagon and Renala. We don't know. Well, no, Mesmer does refer to Marika as mother, though. So that's kind of like the biggest crux of the argument there, that they shouldn't be Carians. Anyway, Stella, nice to see you again. Welcome back in. How you doing? Storm King says, when Miyazaki was asked about the DLC promo image, he said, "We see Mikola on Torrent, correct?" He said, "Yes, that is Mikola." He doesn't say anything about Torrent, though. Is Melina a tarnished? I don't think so, because her eyes are gold up until the point we release Destined Death, for all we know, and then she gets that nice gloam color, as Ratatoska would love me describing it as. It gets that nice purpley color that suggests that she might not be a tarnished. Would I equate Mesmer and Melina's curses to those of Mikola and Melania? No. So Mikola and Melania were both born of a single-bodied god, and that's ever so slightly clearer in the Japanese that it's a god that is one, as opposed to like... Anyway. Mesmer is forcibly given grace, a grace seal. I don't know if he's actually given grace. It seems like he's given like a sword seal or a scar seal, whatever you want to call it, and that's meant to seal away the evil snake within him. It might also curse him to follow a specific duty, but that's a good question, though. And then GM, welcome into the stream. Isn't Melina a demigod, sister of Mesmer, daughter of Marika? Presumably, yes. But it also depends on whether or not like demigod pertains to proximity to Marika or the Elden Ring and things like that. But I would be hard-pressed to say that Melina is not a demigod. Scallies thinks Melina's a demigod by birth, but not by status, is your rationalization. So another way to think about it would be like Melina is a demigod by birth and wasn't created isn't a step demigod like the Karian children, perhaps. Step demigod? Chungus asks, was Melina burned bodiless at the tree? It could have been at the tree. It could have been at the Forge of the Fire Giants, because she seems to need to be burned there to burn the Erdtree again. So, anyway, those are my thoughts on the video that Storm King provided us about the Night of Black Knives being a double betrayal. I do think that there is definitely room for an interpretation that it could have been a double betrayal. I just wish we had more info about anything in this damn game to give me more reason to lean one way or the other, though. So, okay, folks. With that video out of the way, let's go ahead and check out the next video of the night with Sinclair Lore and Saint Trina's review of Shadow of the Erdtree and their discussion. So a little bit of the content. I don't want to say like a warning or a proclamation or an advisory or anything like that. So Sophie of Sinclair Lore as well as Saint Trina are trans. So with the DLC largely focusing on Mikola and his identity relationships with both Saint Trina and Radahn, I'm very interested in their points of view. So I would also advise some of you guys who are newer to the stream that I do not tolerate any forms of like bigotry, transphobia. So I want to be very clear and upfront about that before we begin. So with that being out of the way, I'm excited to see what their reactions were. And I did get a little bit of a heads up that Saint Trina said it was a little bit negative, but that kind of doesn't surprise me based off of what happened with Mikola's character. So, okay, let's go ahead and dive on in.
Okay, hello there, Saint Trina.
Hi, Sophie. How you doing?
Great. You enjoying being trapped at the bottom of a fissure?
I wish.
Oh man, that audio quality though. Do I need to turn it up for you guys? Because it's a little bit hard to understand Saint Trina for me.
I had more to do.
Yeah, I think we all do.
Oh, Ask Next. Did I not link the last video? I probably did when we finished watching it. Maybe I did not. No, I'm pretty sure I did. But yeah, if you guys want to give Storm King some support for his video. And Storm King, once again, thank you for joining the stream. I do appreciate that. Here you go right there. All right, so let me go forward.
Okay, hello there, Saint Trina.
Hi, Sophie. How you doing?
Great. You enjoying being trapped at the bottom of a fissure?
I wish I had more to do.
Yeah, I think we all do.
Snack cookies.
But yeah, this is going to be our little DLC review, I suppose.
Yeah.
After we did our video kind of previewing what we thought the DLC was going to be like and what our hopes for it were. And it's had about 3 weeks to settle, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I did stream the whole thing, so people are aware of what my immediate reactions to most of it were. Yeah, what were your immediate reactions?
Very mixed. My whole experience with this was a little mixed because there are parts that I really, really like, and then there are parts that they dropped. And I'm like, why?
My reaction was also when I say it's a mixed experience, I don't mean oh, it was okay, blah, blah. I mean no, this is absolute highs and also some kind of lows and very little in between. So my initial experience playing it, which people can see on the channel, is I really loved playing it. I loved the design of it. I loved the vibe. I loved kind of the places that they built. I liked all the boss fights. But when it comes to things I wasn't super fond of, it's more what was this all in the service of?
Feels a little bit like we got some rugs pulled out from under us.
Yeah, so I guess we'll start with the positives, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what were the positive parts to you?
Okay, I have super strong feelings about this.
Okay.
For me, Marika herself is absolutely the highlight to me.
Right.
I thought that her motivations, while maybe not the ones I wanted them to explore as much, are really well founded, because the base game has a lot of expansion about there's this comparison between the rot and in my opinion, generational trauma brought on by insane amounts of war. Just endless warfare on this landscape becomes rot.
Yeah, I could definitely see what Saint Trina means about the generational trauma, because that's kind of literally what Mikola is trying to overcome based off of the Ymir dialogue, essentially. It's kind of ironic that Ymir, of all the characters, is the one who gives us the inside scoop on Mikola and Marika, and of course, that might be coming from a bit of a privileged and prejudiced position on Ymir's part there. So, Scaleezy brought up a comment that I wanted to touch on. They said that the DLC just further cemented their stance that Elden Ring is a little too big, both as an open world as with From's style of having holes in their story. The bigger game means the holes are bigger too. I don't know. I feel like if they do continue to have more iterative experiences with Elden Ring and they continue to introduce more story elements to things, it could become more fleshed out in the future, which, it always sucks that the base thing that you have isn't completely fleshed out. But to be fair, we could also turn to the Dark Souls games, and if anything, that might not be entirely fair, because even the Dark Souls games aren't really all that fleshed out, individually at least, but there's enough thematic paintbrushes, strokes given, that you can kind of piece things together to be okay with the games, potentially thematically, but a little bit less so with the nitty gritty minor details here and there, which is unfortunate. Whereas I feel almost the opposite with Elden Ring, where Dark Souls 1, you kind of understood each character's motivations, relatively speaking. I still don't know why Marika actually shattered the Elden Ring. I have an educated guess, but that's all it is, an educated guess. I have no idea why Ranni plotted the Night of the Black Knives, or even what her goal was in conducting the Night of Black Knives, and I think it becomes even more frustrating for me in a game like Elden Ring, because you actually meet Ranni, and she's not a mindless, hollow beef jerky that you have to fight. She says, yeah, I did it all, and then our tarnished must be too damn hollow to be why? It's a little bit extra frustrating for me with that. So Zyro, welcome back into the stream. How you doing?
Rot in these soldier characters, Radon and Melania. So then when we peel the curtain back and we find out that not only was Marika's reign built on the same violence that is ruining her kingdom now, because, all of her children are warring in the base game of Elden Ring. Not only that, but that was already there. And she only got that kind of like in her bones, in her heart, because the Bellarat people, in my estimation, there's some slight speculations going on here, but not a lot, were like harvesting their people, essentially.
Yeah.
For their death rituals. And I assume that like the eventual fate of a shaman and the people that Marika come from is to be jammed together and used as fertilizer for the like sacred trees in their spiral zone. So they're like, "Ooh, I'll just take you guys and you can be our little saints."
Yeah.
And it just like starts this crazy cycle of revenge that I think was kind of corny in the base game with like Hayeda's dad and stuff, and makes it really real and like really palpable. And then the payoff is obviously Shaman Village. I think that place was absolutely stunning. And I mean, like, you could obviously tell, I can't even shut the fuck up about it. Like, the storyline is really interesting. It's got like a lot of richness to it and a lot of stuff to discover. So I think absolutely those are like the best ones.
Yeah, coming into the Shaman Village and then just having the harp play the main theme of Elden Ring with the soft golden glow of like the foliage there was definitely a kind of special moment. You actually feel like this place is something, like with a capital S, It's like very, I don't know, like poignant in a way. There's something very muted about it. There's the somber tone of the harp. It has no accompanying music. So you feel Marika's loneliness with what she left there. And then you get the homage to the grandmother with her braid and the minor Erdtree incantation, which it's kind of ironic that the minor Erdtree incantation isn't even as large or as glorious as Melena's version. So that might be more points in Melena's favor of having a stronger connection to Marika, even though I was arguing it with the base game already. But yeah, definitely a highlight of the DLC for me was going to the Shaman Village. And then there weren't like a whole lot of other like real highlights, just because so much of the DLC was very disparate and disconnected from everything else in the lore. Global said walking into the Shaman Village changed your life. Oh, Chadwick, get wrecked. Wait, you should know this. This is the entire Shadow of the Erdtree review, but why am I talking to a dude who muted me? Anyway.
And my last thing to say about that is that it strengthens intensely Marika's connection to being a tree. It's not just Marika. It's like literally her heritage to be a tree. It's part of her lineage. Yeah. I'll let you rock. What else did you like?
My positives were largely gameplay and design based rather than story based. Mm-hmm. So, like, I feel like the design approach they take in Shadow of the Erdtree, it addresses every single issue I had with the base game's design. So, like, one of the
I'm really curious about that because I feel like I have the almost complete opposite take, where I'm just kind of really over a lot of the design of what they did in the DLC. Actually, that's not fair. I really liked a lot of the overworld stuff. Even though I was playing Blessing List my first time through, it did not feel oppressively difficult unless I was fighting a boss. But everything else felt like really well tuned for me specifically with no blessings. So I definitely don't regret my no blessing run, even if that definitely upset people that I played the game that they didn't want me to play. But Miyazaki said in his interview that you could ostensibly play and beat the DLC without using the blessings. So I was like, okay, challenge accepted. And I did. Anyway.
Problems that I brought up quite a bit when I was talking about original Elden Ring is that they built this gigantic map. And it feels like it's almost like they lacked a little bit of confidence in just like the world sort of speaking for itself. And they're like, unless something happens every like 10 seconds, they're going to get bored. So you play through Elden Ring, and there's like all these sort of copy pasted, like here's an encampment, here's a tower, here's a dragon, here's like a guy running out of the woods to attack you, and it's like there's multiple instances in Elden Ring where there is like a very long bridge leading somewhere, but then there's also a little warp gate on the end of the bridge, and if you touch the warp gate, it takes you to the other side of the bridge. And like all that does is just means you don't have to walk across the bridge. So it's almost like they thought, oh, they'll get bored if they have to walk across the bridge. We'll give them a teleporter.
Oh my gosh, that's so true. Like in the case of Gold Mask, that was the fun part, was trying to go find him. But you really didn't have to try that hard.
And what Shadow of the Erdtree's map does is it avoids all of that. It has, to me, the vibe of New Londo Ruins from Dark Souls 1.
Yes. Yep.
Where, like, yeah, you go down to New Londo Ruins, and it's, like, desolate, and there's these hollows there, but they're just kind of lying there. They're not really engaging with you. It's just these people that have been, like, driven mad by despair, and they're just lying there. And, like, the fact that it is empty and the fact that the people in it are just ignoring you gives it this sense of like absolute sort of overwhelming despair and hopelessness that wouldn't be there if like you went down the lift and then like a whole lot of dark wraiths rushed you.
Right. Okay.
And I feel like some of the later design in the series, in Elden Ring and also in parts of Dark Souls 3, particularly the Dark Souls 3 DLC, they would have had dark wraiths rush you.
Oh, you are so right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So
is that a fair comparison? Because when you go into the painted world of Ariamis, maybe there's not a lot of them, but you do have some non-hostile Corvians. But nonetheless, I will agree with Sophie there that the set dressing of going into New Londo with all the dejected folks is quite a different experience than some other parts of like the DLC of Elden Ring, but there's certainly a lot of Dark Wraith type moments with the DLC, to be fair there.
When you first pop out of that cave into the main kind of like field area, and there's just these like shadowed undead that are just wandering around, and you can fight them if you want, but there's no point. Like, that to me is like way more effective than if you stepped out and there was immediately a whole lot of like, you know, Messmer soldiers or something, because it lets the game breathe.
Yeah, and there's still plenty of spots like that too.
Yeah, and everything is like way closer together in the amount of time it takes you in Elden Ring to cross an area like Caelid or like Liurnia that's essentially just one biome.
Right.
In Shadow of the Erdtree, you would go through like maybe 3 or 4 totally distinct areas in that time because there's so much variety in terms of the places you go. And just weird little things like the worm people sticking out of the ground. Like, again, those are not like a challenge. They're not like there to be like, oh my god, the worm people are attacking you. They're just there to be like, yeah, this is what this world is like. Like, out of the graves, people
Okay, I see what she's saying a bit more here and there.
Spirits grow as these weird worm things. So it feels more like you are just in a world than it does like, here is a challenge that's been set for you.
And that's very Sheol-ish. All that.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of like the way that the Greek underworld's described.
Oh, yeah.
Where it's like everyone is just like a shade wandering around this sort of like grey, misty place. It has that vibe to it.
That's a pretty good comparison. I'm surprised I haven't really heard many people compare it to Elden Ring, because like as soon as you hear that, or Shadow of the Erdtree, I should say, I'm like, yeah, that totally makes a lot of sense. I don't know why I didn't think of that. Anyway, Bloodring said the Abyssal Wood should have had a frenzied dragon as the field boss. Bro, screw you. That's messed up. How dare you wish that evil upon us, even though I'm a Frenzied Flame fan. Rachel asks, did the twins come before Godwin, Moog, and Morgott? We don't actually know. With Godwin being called the Golden, he could have been the Golden Boy because he was the youngest. It could have been that he was the firstborn and therefore given like the most prominence. Or he could have just been the one child that was not deformed and therefore like ipso facto became the firstborn, essentially, by status, if not by birthright. But I don't know is the long and short of it. We talked about that quite a bit, I believe, on yesterday's stream or the day before. Was Godwin the only child that was seemingly not flawed / cursed in some way? That's another good question. I mean, since we had Mesmer get pulled out of nowhere, just like damn, what girl name from DS3? Not Isabel. Oh man, why can't I think of her name? It's definitely not Fiora. I feel like it's somewhere in between the two. Guinevere, Gwendolyn, Faram. It's a privy. I'm trying not to read chat because I'm sure you guys have said it by now. Oh no. I complain about her so much and I can't. I'm drawing a blank. Anyway. Filianor. Yes. Yeah, so with Mesmer being an essentially updated version of Filianor, I wouldn't be surprised if there's other demigods we didn't hear about. Perhaps we'll see them in Night Rain, perhaps not. I was actually thinking yesterday, or maybe it was earlier today, that I would not be surprised if in the Night Rain we get the Soul of Cinder, but rather than it being one, it could split into like each avatar of fire, essentially, that you have to fight as the final boss instead of a Gladius. Yorshka as well. Yeah, Yorshka's another rug pull, but to be fair, Yorshka may not have actually been Gwyn's child. It's complicated. Technically, Yorshka should not be Gwyn's child if Gwendolyn was canonically Gwyn's last born. So, Sel asks, who is Yorshka? She was the girl that you find, the half-dragon girl in Irithyll on the way to Anor Londo. And the secret path of invisible platforms. Anyway, let's go back into it. The Dark Moon Captain? Yes.
Also means that, like, when you find, like, a cave in the side of a mountain, you kind of know it's going to be significant because they haven't copy-pasted, like, caves over and over again.
Yes.
You don't have to keep this. If you're playing Elden Ring, you eventually get used to it, but you sort of have to remember, like, okay, out of the, like, dozen caves in this area, which are the useful ones? In Shadow of the Erdtree, they're all kind of useful. Yeah,
I guess I don't remember what you get for a lot of the dungeons. I know, like, I will forever remember where the Amog is, the Ancient Meteoric or Great Sword, but I don't remember where all the Shadow Tree blessings are. And it would, I don't know, I feel like one of the biggest failures of the DLC is not having more redundancy built into the Skadoo Tree blessings, like how you get more than enough golden seeds to completely max out your Crimson and Cerulean tier flasks in the base game.
So yeah, I really liked that. I really liked the boss fights.
Me too.
None of them came across as unfair to me.
Yeah, I liked them all.
So when I played through it, I was a pure strength build with a Zweihander and no shield and no ranged attacks. So my experience with the bosses was kind of a blur in a lot of ways because I'm up really close to them. A lot of them do have like big AoE.
Blur because of the camera. Bro, Gaius, he messed me up. I memory hold that dude. That was one of the worst bosses for me to fight. I fought, pre-nerf Gaius like a real player does, but bro, that fight was really bad with no blessings.
AoE attacks, they move very quickly, so
yes.
I have my memories of them are a little like just sort of like what just happened. But I did enjoy it. What I've noticed now is that friends of mine are streaming their playthroughs, and they're friends of mine who have used traditionally ranged builds. And I'm watching them fight the bosses, and I'm appreciating the bosses a lot more because I'm able to see, like, get a really good picture of their moveset. like I was watching my friend Michaela fight Rolana.
I love it.
About like 10 minutes before we started recording this, and
Yes.
I really, really appreciate Rolana. Rolana's like it's like they got Pontiff Sullivan and they sort of like perfected it into something else.
Yeah, I would say it's more fair than Pontiff Sullivan in,
exactly.
a few areas.
Yeah. Also, like Midra is in a lot of ways like an iteration on the Dancer of the Boreal Valley in the way that he moves around, like this weird sort of snaking, sort of like twirling thing. Yep. Yeah, they really seem to like that. A lot of them weirdly had kind of Sekiro vibes to them. Almost.
Yeah, Midra is one of my highlight boss fights for the DLC. I also really like Metter, and, you know, as much as you guys meme on me for doing a no blessing run, I probably would have not nearly liked the Midra fight or the Metter fight nearly as much, because they were pretty easy even without blessings. Like, it was only a handful of tries, which, I mean, I enjoy challenge and like learning the boss movesets rather than just kind of completely overpowering them. So I really feel like I got the most that I could out of my experience fighting Midra, Mesmer. Rolana really dumpstered me, and I finally gave in and used Spirit Blessings when fighting her. But I think that was a good fight. I just wish Rolana wasn't so damn mobile, because it felt like I couldn't even get off a singular cast of X-Like's Rot Breath before she was able to close the gap and hit me, unless I was using the Spirit Ashes to gain enough time that she was not aggroed on me to actually be able to unleash a breath on her. So that's kind of like one of my biggest complaints about the boss design in the DLC. It's that they're simultaneously too aggressive, or if they're not too aggressive, they have gap closers which are too quick. And you could I feel like you could have one or the other, but having both be there is a little bit oppressive. And I think Bale is like a pretty good example of that, where it feels like I just never have a moment to kind of like reset my mental and feel like I have enough space to drink an Estus flask properly. Like there were a couple attacks that Bale would do where I would dodge one and then try to take a drink. He would reset to neutral in that time and then kill me in the one hit that followed up. So it was really a reliance on RNG as to whether or not I would be able to beat a boss like that, which is like, okay, if I'm relying on RNG, then there's like, this isn't related to skill. So I'll go ahead and use a spirit summon as well as Yura for Bale at least. Easy without the blessings. So I wouldn't say like Midra was easy. Metter definitely was easy without the blessings, but it's always been my policy that if a boss will summon ads, then I'm also free to summon ads. So I used a Spirit Ash against Metter, I think, or did I? I don't think I did, but she really was not very difficult for me. Rachel says, quote, "You heal when it's safe." She still doesn't know when that is. It depends on the boss. Like Midra, you get space between his attacks that allows it to work. He was fun to parry. He was fun to fight mano a mano. He was very scary at moments, and I learned like some of the strats to deal with him at times, which is pretty much all I could ask for. All right, Ask Next, thanks for joining us. You have a good night. It's totally a fair fight when RNG just has to give you their favor. And to be fair, like I'm sure if I spent enough time to own ball it, I could get good, but I wasn't having fun. So compared to like some of the base game bosses, I feel like a lot of the DLC was more in the vein of Malekith and Morgott rather than a character like Moog in the sewers that doesn't use Nihil. Gaius, no space to heal, just pray he whiffs. Gaius has... you could get space with Gaius at times. The issue with Gaius was that it was really hard to read a lot of his follow-on attacks, and there were definitely times where he just seemed to do an extra attack in places that he hadn't before with no-tell setting it up, which really threw me off.
It's like they're dancing.
Yep.
Yep, and they do add...
The Lion Dancer is another one of those ones where I don't know like the proper range to heal sometimes. Actually, he wasn't that bad to be honest, but he was a camera boss through and through. And that made him really a lot harder to read.
Had the ability to do Sekiro deflection with one of the crystal tears.
Yes, that one's so awesome.
I'm really glad they did that. I still wish it had been a weapon art.
Yeah.
But I'm glad they did it. I really feel like that. Firstly, it should have been the base game.
Yeah.
And it should have been a weapon art that you can copy onto, like, any katana. Like, that would have been perfect for me. But I'll take what they've given us. Yeah. Yeah. So all that's great. The encounter design also, like, kind of building on what I was talking about map design. The encounter design's also really good. I feel like it's almost more restrained than I was expecting, because like one of the problems I had with the Dark Souls 3 DLCs is it's like they went, well, this needs to be more epic.
Lasers
How are we going to do
everywhere, tons of enemies.
Yeah, lasers everywhere. Like there's a bit in the Ring City that just haunts me to this day. Is like, why did you do this? Where there is an NPC you're speaking to through a door, and that's at the end. That's at a dead end street. But at the other end of the street, there's like 3 really powerful knights who spawn walking toward the door. So literally, like, if you talk to that NPC, there's just going to be 3 guys just like smashing you to pieces. And it's like, what? Why are you doing this? Like, it just comes across like, how do we make this harder? Control V. We'll add some more. We'll add some more dudes to it. There's really nothing like that in this. It feels like they've actually sort of breathed out a little bit and gone back to like Dark Souls and Demon Souls style encounter design, where it's like...
The ironic thing is, even though I agree with Sophie that it is kind of bullcrap that you can get ganked from behind while trying to talk to an NPC, and they should have had like a safe zone buffer for that. That is probably, unironically, my favorite section of the DLC, the avenue with the 3 Herald Knights and everything like that. I don't know. I don't really know why. I think it's just like the thematics of it. I just really like the actual Ringed City. But also, to be fair, I think Sophie is more hyper-focusing on the Ringed City itself and maybe forgetting how it was to go through Ashes of Ariandel, which I think is not very surprising, because Ashes of Ariandel, I think, is more or less pretty forgettable, with the exception of it, first of all, being the Painted World, and then second of all, Sister Frida and Father Ariandel himself. So other than that, it's pretty forgettable, and the Champion's Grave Tender is something I want to forget, but unfortunately can't. Lion Dancer Cinema. Oh yeah, I absolutely love the Lion Dancer as a boss design. It just feels a little bit too much sometimes. Pixie says when bullcrap like that happens, you laugh at the devs, like the Bow dudes in Anne Orlando. Yeah, to me, I think that kind of does exemplify some of what Miyazaki says about enjoyment and death in the original Dark Souls. Like, to me, like one of my funniest deaths was when I first got into the Darkroot Basin, and then I saw the giant mushroom dudes walking by, and I kind of ignored them. Then I looted, I think, the Titanite shard of some variety from like the little water, and then they just like walked up and one-shot punched me to death. It's like, it's a mushroom. How does it have that much power? And then, of course, my other perfect death in Dark Souls 1 was finally making it all the way down the Great Hollow and then getting one-shot punched by a mushroom rather than just leaving it be. That one hurt, but it was also really funny. And even though it's really painful, I think it's kind of funny that the damn red Drake Wyvern can burn everybody's butts to crisp after finally managed to beat the Taurus demon without a bonfire in between.
You can just have like 3 knights in a room.
Yeah.
And it's challenging if they're placed intelligently.
Right, because they do this thing where they like push you around with their moveset. You know, like shields help a lot with that, and flippy dippy guys help.
Like a really good example of that is like in the first Dark Souls that everyone remembers. There's the bridge in Undeadburg. And And it's like there's this bridge, and then there's two guys above the bridge throwing firebombs into it. And then there's a door at the end of the bridge, but if you open the door, there's a guy right behind the door with an axe who'll hit you.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
And then there's like another two hollows in the room with the axe guy. It's like 5 enemies that are not individually dangerous. And if they just were in front of you, they wouldn't necessarily be dangerous, but they're placed in such a way that like it's actually a little puzzle you have to figure out, and everyone remembers that. Even though
Yeah, this is probably like one of the most iconic parts of the Undead Burg to me. That place kind of messed me up, and then it's like, okay, if you approach this systematically, I do think Undead Burg does a really good job of tutorializing the rest of Dark Souls. It's just a little bit unfortunate that it's so far removed from the Undead Asylum, which it's like Undead Asylum is a super basic tutorial, which the game kind of needs, but I feel like this is just better overall. What I really mean is it's kind of unfortunate you could do what I did on my first playthrough and then try to go down and meet Nito and go through the catacombs, because that was painful.
No, it's just 5 zombie guys. They're just placed really, really well. That's so much more memorable than like, you go down a street in Ringed City and there's just like 3 Herald Knights charging at you. Yeah. Even though that's harder, it's less interesting. So it feels like they've really, really gone back to that. It was like a real breath of fresh air. I felt like they've gone back to their roots in terms of the encounter design. They're not trying to be epic. They're not trying to stick gimmicks upon gimmicks upon gimmicks to make the fights work. They've just made good fights. Again, going back to bosses, like bosses that really worked well, I really liked Martyr.
Oh my god, I love her.
Yeah, because Martyr is like an obvious iteration on Ebrietas from Bloodborne.
Right.
They just give her attacks on her flanks.
Yeah.
When you're fighting Ebrietas, you can just stay on her side and just hit her in the flank until she dies, because she has very little ability to hit you on the sides.
Yes.
Martyr can just finger flick you from the sides. I thought that was a really good iteration on it. One of the boss fights, I think, like, I'm glad they're optional, because the giant walking furnaces, when it comes to...
Bro, the furnace golem was so cool the first time, and then that stuff got old as hell by the third.
Very, very tall, like, giant enemies. They're limited to hit...
And also, like, why was there no real hint to throw urns into the golem's heads? Like, there wasn't a dev note or anything that I saw.
Them in the ankle, because that's kind of all you can reasonably do. You can do it in Sekiro, because Sekiro is based around like a very specific kind of character who can flip around like Spider-Man and like climb on top of bosses and like jump onto the side of the arena and like do like shinobi arts and things, whereas Elden Ring by its nature has to allow for like, it could just be like a sword and board character and they have to be able to beat it.
Yeah, they have so many playstyles to work with, so...
Yeah, so like overall I feel like purely as a game, like
So there was a dev note after Bonnie Village? So I must have approached the other one before that point. Okay. There's one outside Shaded Castle? Wait, Shaded Castle's in the base game. Do you mean the Shadow Keep? Anyway, like, it would have been nice if they could have doubled that up or had it be like a custom, like, not, what are they called? The little notes that the merchants have about like the shades in the graveyards and stuff. So I guess there was a dev note, but I must have missed it, or I found it like later after I'd already had to deal with the Wickermen from earlier.
The experience I had doing it was really, really good. Like, I had a really great time. I really like Stone Coffin Fisher. I think that's probably one of the best dungeons in Elden Ring.
You like the laser guys.
See, I don't know. I kind of felt disappointed at how, I don't even want to say like linear, but this place kind of felt bland to me. I think with just having the grave golems there. I did like the variant that had like this Saint Trina sleep. The putrescent stuff was kind of cool. I guess I just wasn't a huge fan of the layout.
Well, yeah, I liked it because, like, they've never really done anything like this before. The closest thing to this would be the Great Hollow in Dark Souls 1, where it's like
It's kind of interesting because this place gave me Shulva vibes. Even like when I see it now and the way that it kind of like spirals, it does remind me of Shulva a little bit. Do you guys feel that way as well, or no?
Like this very long vertical descent, but there's no like elevators. There's no like ladders or anything. You're just having to move from foothold to foothold to foothold. But it's in Elden Ring, which is a lot faster and has a dedicated jump button, which Dark Souls.
Blood Ring says very Shulva vibes. Part of the reason why I actually dislike this is because you can't feasibly climb back up from it. I would probably like it a little bit more if you could have access to ladders or like jumpable spots to go back up all the way to the top from the bottom. To me, that is kind of an unironic criticism of the level design of Elden Ring at places, is that they're a little bit too reliant on fast travel, and I think they should have thought about the level design from a no fast travel kind of challenge run, because I've seen a friend do it, which I think is an interesting way of going through it, because it does make the game feel a little bit larger. You have to be more intentional about where you go, and it feels a little bit more realistic and a little bit more immersive, even if it does become a lot bit more tedious with how much longer it actually takes to traverse between regions. And so the Stone Coffin Fissure, I can kind of forgive it because this is kind of an anomalous area, but it is a minor complaint at that point. And then there's another place by the waterfalls that go down towards the Abyssal Woods that has the same issue. Thanks, I-Man. Appreciate that. I know it's in the game. I remember hearing about it, but I don't actually remember seeing it. Oh, yeah, and I feel like that quote, it makes sense, but it's a little bit unclear that it works by throwing it in there. So it takes a little bit of crafting to do, which hopefully you have the materials for it.
Souls kind of did, kind of didn't.
Right.
Yeah. I really like the finger ruin areas.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They have the vibe that the nightmare areas in Bloodborne do, but they're also a lot more desolate and empty. So you can actually sit there and just kind of take in, like, oh, this place is really weird.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'd appreciate these areas a bit more without the artillery lamprey and having a little bit more of a reward for going in here. Because when I got up to my first whistle and I saw the Spirit Ash summon icon appear on the screen, I was like, oh god, this is going to summon a boss. So I was like, okay, I'm going to wait and explore this whole place first before coming back here. And then I was literally exploring every nook and cranny because, in Elden Ring, when you have invisible walls that hide Lusat, it's in your damn best interest to check absolutely everything in the game, which I think is kind of a detriment to it in some ways. But anyway, I spent way too much time in the Finger Ruins for literally nothing other than interacting with the bell, which you couldn't even do the first time you went there until you heard the stupid story from Ymir. And there wasn't even like a site of grace near here, so I had to like take an extra long trip a second time to do it, which is extra salt in the wound from earlier.
It gives it a lot of grandeur and a lot of otherworldliness, I would say.
Yeah, so like that's what I'm getting from it. It's like they're actually allowing the world to sort of speak for itself without this like weird sort of like worry that if there isn't like a boss fight in the next 10 seconds, you'll get bored.
Yeah.
What was your favorite area?
I think just, that's a tough choice. I think Ener Lim is pretty much tied with the actual Martyr's room, like the lead up to Martyr's room and Martyr's room itself. I think the lore implications of like having tubes be in like this Romulus like moon space type area is like super cool. And one of my favorite lore bits out of that is just the idea that like the fingers are kind of like described as reflections of the stars in this DLC. They refer to them as like a procession of stars, and they also guide our fate. So I thought it was like one of their most literal as above, so below type motifs they've ever done, and they executed it well because like there's so much history with like grasping imagery in Miyazaki games.
Absolutely.
Grasping imagery, and of course, gaping tummies.
I kind of like this assessment here, especially after the wake of the Duskblood, right? The Duskblood trailer where the girl grasps the dude arm at the very beginning of it and gives him the wheel thing.
Those are his two favorite symbols. And Martyr gets both of them in a package that is like tailor-made for an alchemy lore nerd to come in and be like, aha! I understand what's going on here.
My favorite was probably Abyssal Woods.
Fair.
I feel like in the same way a lot of the boss fights I feel like are kind of perfected iterations upon past bosses. This feels like they got some of the elements of Bloodborne and they did them again in a way that works genuinely as like a survival horror thing. Because I remember when Bloodborne came out, it was described by people as like, oh yeah, they've got souls and they've done it as survival horror. And I've always been like, did they?
Yeah,
because the thing
like
about
Demon Souls, really.
Well, the thing about Bloodborne is like, you actively want to encounter the enemies because killing them gets you blood echoes and upgrade materials, which you then use to make yourself stronger. So, like, it has the aesthetics of a survival horror game. It has kind of the encounter design of a survival horror game. But if you think about, like, Resident Evil, you kind of don't really want to engage the things in Resident Evil unless you have to because you have such limited resources. Whereas in Bloodborne, it's like, well, everything you kill gets you blood echoes, which make you stronger. And if you die, you just respawn. Nothing's really permanently lost in that game. So what I'm thinking of here is like the Winter Lantern enemies in Bloodborne versus the Aging Untouchables in Abyssal Woods. Because, yes, when you first encounter Winter Lanterns in Bloodborne, they're pretty scary. You don't really understand what they are. They're making your head explode when you look at them. And you can...
Gotta appreciate how just a random trash mob is way more terrifying than pretty much all of the bosses combined in Bloodborne. It's like, I'd almost rather fight 2 Orphan of Causes than having to deal with a hallway and 2 Winter Lanterns next to each other. That's probably a lie, but maybe if you made their health pool similar. Oh god. Could you imagine having to fight a Winter Lantern with the health pool of Kos? Holy crap. That's why they chained up that Brain of Mensis to pay for its sins. Blood Dragon was saying, or I called him Blood Dragon now. Blood Ring was saying that the Abyssal Woods are too empty. That's why they need the Frenzied Dragon. No, they don't. But I do agree that the Abyssal Woods are a bit too big. I would be okay with the size of the Abyssal Woods if you could summon Torrent after clearing out Midra's Manse. Because it sucks to try to go back through it to re-explore and see if you've gotten everything that you missed. Only for it to just be filled with rats and a very, very, very slow exploration style on top of that. Doomfist, you played the DLC on a big screen and the Abyssal Woods was an experience. I love the Abyssal Woods. I absolutely adored the inclusion of the aged untouchables, whatever they're called. I'm going to call them Winter Lanterns, but the only reason why I'm not doing that right now is because we have an OG Winter Lantern on the screen.
Can hear them in the distance with this like blum, 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 blum song, and they're very kind of eerie and strange, right? Yeah. But when you kind of figure them out, which doesn't honestly take that long, you can just run up and like you can just carve through them. Like okay, like I equip some sedatives, I run up and I stab them and they die. So it's kind of a survival horror thing the first time you do it. What Abyssal Woods does is it puts a Winter Lantern equivalent enemy in it, but it makes it invincible and it gives it a one.
So yeah, like one of my biggest complaints about the aging untouchables is that the parry mechanic and the dev note that alludes to it is absolute garbage. I would just rather they be either completely invulnerable or that they needed a special gimmick to kill them other than parrying, because it honestly feels like a glitch, like it shouldn't be in the game. Like, it's obviously intended because they have like a missable item in the first one you kill, but maybe you guys felt differently, but I legitimately felt like it was a bug abuse parrying them. And Chungus Toad, you load the Abyssal Woods. The stealth section was too gimmicky and forced. It was the lowest point for FromSoft. It baffles you how it was implemented. I have mixed feelings about it. As far as like the thematics go, I really like that they tried something different. It's completely different from anything else in the base game and the DLC, so I give it a bit more grace than perhaps other people would. But I think it would have been received a little bit better if it wasn't so damn long and arduous trekking through it. So I feel like the character of the place could have been accomplished with like a third of the size. But you could probably argue much of the same about most of the overworld in the DLC. Looking at you, Karo's Hidden Grove, as well as the Cerulean Coast.
One shot.
Hmm.
It's like I've found out subsequently you can actually kill the aging untouchables if you parry them just as they're about to grab you. I didn't know that at the time. I literally figured these things must just be invincible.
Yeah.
So
I did too.
Yeah. So by what they do is like they actually create a situation where your stats and the enemy stats don't fucking matter anymore, because those things can't die, and if they find you, you're gonna die.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter what level you are, doesn't matter what your build is, there is no like trick you can use. You just have to like not get seen by these things. So like that was like a really, really, really interesting way of doing it, where it's like, here's this stat heavy RPG that's all about like builds and stuff like that, and like here's all these weapon arts and all these talismans and all these different equipment sets you can wear, and here's all these different stats, and there's a specific NPC who lets you reallocate them. And they're like, okay, actually none of that matters anymore, just don't get seen by this thing. And it makes you feel very, very vulnerable. And it takes all the empowerment out of like the level up system. They have figured out a way to like disempower the player and make them feel like they're not strong enough to do something. But instead of doing that by making the numbers really high or including like a gimmick where you need a specific weapon to damage the enemy or something, they just do it by like saying, actually, the numbers don't matter, we're bypassing them.
Yeah, I really like that point as well. So, Bloodring was saying that the Bloodborne Winter Lanterns are still like a million times creepier in your opinion. And this isn't kind of related, but one of the reasons why I would also call the Aging Untouchables Winter Lanterns is because this is what the Winter Lantern plant name comes from. The Chinese lantern, the Japanese lantern, some kind of cherry. I can't remember the other names for it. It comes from Hozuki in Japanese, and that's kind of what they're labeled internally. And so I don't know why they came up with Winter Lantern specifically, but they kind of remind me of like the cages on the amygdala's faces in Bloodborne. And I thought perhaps at one point in development, the Winter Lanterns could be related to the Brain of Mensis, and the Brain of Mensis itself could be related to amygdalae. But I just think this is a really cool plant. Like, I've never seen anything like this. So wanted to share that little bit of trivia with you guys there. Oh, and of course, like, these dudes remind me of like how they have like a plant-like head with a big old cherry bulb inside, which looks more like a tomato.
And then that leads into the Midra's Manse area. And this is, I think, where we start to move into like, not that I dislike this, I think Midra's Manse is amazing, but it's like, I like this, but I'm not sure how well this fits into the base game that we played through to get here.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think a lot of people would be way more willing to forgive Midra's Manse if Midra or Nanaya were related to either Marika or the Glow-Eyed Queen more specifically, because it doesn't feel like you get enough of a payoff for going so far out of your way to get there. Now, the Lord of Frenzied Flame thing is really, really cool, but it also just kind of feels a little bit out of left field with the way that it does not connect into the base game. So I think even if you kept Midra as a fake Lord of Frenzied Flame and had Nanaya be related to Marika or something like that, or just maybe something a little bit stronger in a different direction, it could have worked. It just feels so disconnected, as they're saying.
Yes.
Yeah, so you're nodding along, so I think you might have something to say.
Okay, yeah, I definitely do. Under the bad section. Oh, Nanaya, how I don't care. That's what I wrote. Okay, so when we first saw Nanaya in the DLC trailers, I was pretty hard stuck on this has got to be the Glowmite Queen. Literally, it's an important mother figure who has black hair. We haven't seen one yet except for Renala. And I've always assumed that the Glowmite Queen's got to have black hair to mirror Marika, sort of. And we get all of that, and then she's just like wearing gold and doesn't really seem to be anybody. And has like a lord who also kind of, like you said to me a couple days ago, really invalidates a lot of Shabriri's importance to the main storyline. So I'm just...
This is the thing about Shadow of the Erdtree. If Shadow of the Erdtree were actually Elden Ring 2...
Yeah.
Which it functionally is. They've just made it a DLC of itself, right?
Yeah.
If this were Elden Ring 2, a lot of this wouldn't bother me because I would be able to view Elden Ring and Shadow of the Erdtree as wholly discrete things.
Right.
But the problem is there's so much importance placed on the Realm of Shadow in the DLC.
Mm-hmm.
And the things that you find there and what happens there, that in the moment, in the self-contained Realm of Shadow, I have no problem with any of this. This all makes sense to me.
Completely
but the problem is, at the end of this, you then have to leave the Realm of Shadow and go back into the lands between. And you're kind of left scratching your head about, like, we were talking about Shabriri, and, like, I'm not saying this because I have some weird emotional attachment to the character of Shabriri. I wasn't like, you say, oh, come, I'm going to find more of my boy Shabriri. It's like... The base game makes a big point about Shabriri. Like, they literally call, like, the Frenzied Eyes Shabriri grapes. And they say, yes, Frenzy began with Shabriri.
Yes,
Shabriri was this, like, the most
one.
reviled man in history, and his eyes were gouged out, and the flame filled the sockets of the eyes. And then, like, you encounter Shabriri, and he's possessed Yura's corpse, and he's like, I'll never die, I'm Shabriri. And he's, like, trying to get you to go and inherit the flame that's below Lanedale.
Mm-hmm.
And then in this, they add the Midra and Nanaya story, which has nothing to do with Shabriri. But also, like, that's really...
And, like, one of my biggest complaints about it is that he's called Lord of Frenzied Flame instead of, like, failed Lord of Frenzied Flame or failed to become Lord of Frenzied Flame. Something along those lines. Because they tend to use that kind of terminology in relation to other things, like the... Oh, although maybe it's not actually in the game. But anyway, no. In Bloodborne, I don't think they call the Brain of Mensis deformed, but they do say it has malformed eyes. But the stillbirth of their brains is kind of like terminology that I could expect to be used with Midra, but it's not. And so you have, I think, his remembrance, which literally calls him the Lord of Frenzied Flame in one line, and then it says that he failed to be the Lord of Frenzied Flame in another, and it's like... so frustrating, because if you're trying to take the text at its word, then it's shooting itself in the foot and contradicting itself, saying that he was the Lord of Frenzy Flame. Oh wait, he was never the Lord of Frenzy Flame. Opens up this huge slippery slope that you can therefore doubt any item's description, and therefore, as soon as you begin to doubt any item description, you can eventually doubt all of them, and so you're just left picking and choosing what suits you personally, which is fine on an individual level, but if you're trying to ever establish a rapport with anybody else, or come to an agreement about the base facts of the game, then the facts, in my opinion, should be incontrovertible, or when they're not set in stone, they should be listed as being hearsay or representative of a belief or the thoughts or the words of characters within the setting. So that way, even if they're wrong, it's because people are fallible and may not have the full picture of things, which is a very, very common FromSoft trope, which is why I simultaneously love to hate them because of how much more difficult it makes parsing through the finer details of things.
Significant. Like what you find there, like the frenzy has
Yes.
warped an entire like forest into something else.
Mm-hmm.
The horn scent inquisitors are there to like try to suppress it, and there's this stuff about like, well, the horn scent knew about the frenzy and they were like trying to stop it from spreading and all this other stuff.
Yes.
So you have this like hyper significant frenzy thing. There's actually more frenzy in that than there is in the base game. Like this is like, no, here's a whole frenzy like legacy dungeon.
Mm-hmm.
And it does not mention Shibriri at any point. So on its own, as a self-contained thing, fine.
Yeah.
I get it. This all makes sense to me, but then like you pop, like let's say you do the Midra thing, and you pop back into the base game, and then it's all talking about Shibriri again.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, hang on, is Shibriri that important then? If like this stuff is just happening independently of him, like how is he the most reviled man in history who is the source of the frenzied flame, but also like the frenzy themed area doesn't acknowledge his existence?
Right.
And like I'm saying,
And to be fair, I've kind of always looked at Shibriri as like the jongleur in that his goals with the Frenzied Flame might not be actually related to what the Three Fingers wants at all, and he may legitimately just want the world to burn because he thinks it's funny, whereas the Frenzied Flame and the Three Fingers might just want like permanent regression, depending on your thoughts on that. So Shibriri seems willing to lie to get what he wants, whereas... Hold on. I mean, even the Three Fingers, I think, is probably lying through a mission between what words get relayed to Hayata and the Tarnished. But Shibriri is so far gone, he can't even really keep the lie going that long before he just loses it and starts cackling like the Jonkler. You usually call him Shabibi? I do too. Halo asks, didn't the one description mean he failed in the past, but the implication is it finally happened when we shut up? He failed in the past tense, but succeeded in the current, like Melania failing to become a goddess until we fight her, despite her worshippers' efforts. So the Melania thing is written as hearsay, I think, at least in the Japanese. Nope, that's not it. Is it her set? With the third bloom, she will become a true goddess. Oh, it has Kito, which is... It's like surely, which in a way is not exactly hypothetical language, but it kind of is. Like, because it's not written like super factually... And so there's also a bit of a disagreement as to when she did her second bloom, or whether or not she's yet to do her third. But I don't want to get into that. There's definitely like a lot of arguments to be made on that point. Because you may have had one bloom in the Lake of Rot, which is very arguable. You could have had potentially another bloom with the what's his name? The blind swordsman. And you also have the weird bloom outside of Millennia's room. And potentially, I mean, this one isn't potential. You actually have the bloom with the Scarlet Rot in the Swamp of Ionia against Radon. So we have potentially like 4 different times she could have bloomed. And the reason why I included the Lake of Rot is because you can get the rot butterflies there. And they say that they came from the wings of the whatever the goddess, or they're believed to be. So this one, at the very least, I take it to be more of a belief and isn't necessarily 100% true. And I kind of view this kind of in the same lens of the way that Aldrich would see the world get drowned in his Age of the Deep, and the way that Rykard would devour the world once he becomes like the great serpent, essentially. And then let's look at, what's it called? Lord of Frenzied Flame. So it's not that one. Nope. Naya's torch. A torch made by attaching a dying flame of frenzy to a small spinal column. In a distant land, in an age-long past, was born a man who failed to become the Lord of Frenzied Flame. All that remains of him is cradled gently by Naya. So are you asking or saying whether or not he failed to become Lord of Frenzied Flame in the past, and then that situation changes when we walk up to him? Maybe. Let's double check this. So I guess the issue is, if all that remains of the man that failed to become Lord of Frenzied Flame, how on earth is Naya cradling that when we can meet him? And this is just kind of like a weird description in general, the Naya's torch thing. And I honestly don't like to think about this too much because it's just a bit of a headache. So some people think that the small spinal column is meant to refer to a child. So they think, what's her face? Naya and her baby made that? I honestly have no idea what to expect. It seems like Naya could have had another person that was a failed Lord of Frenzied Flame, and then she came over here and treated Midra, but I don't know. I really don't know. Because Midra, like, he seems to have a full spinal column despite, you know, the barbs and the thorns within him. Halo says, during her fight, she's named the goddess of Ra. You think that's also in the Japanese? Yes. So, some people don't think she's a real goddess. Others think that she is. So, I'm just, you know, giving you guys the opinions that are out there. Or Moog's glory to his inevitable reign. Yes, that's another one that I can think of. I actually think that is close to what the Japanese says. And I think it's more like not meant to be like a literal description. And that needs a little bit of a critical eye. Inevitable. Okay. Oh, Kitaru Becky. So, Becky is kind of like should be. And is more like an ought to be. Like, there ought to be glory to the coming dynasty, essentially. So, oh, they translated that as inevitable. Oh, I could see why they did that. Like, the age should come, the age is coming, it's therefore inevitable. I see what they did with that. So yeah, as far as the English goes, it should be understood that it's kind of speaking from a certain point of view, whereas the Japanese, it's a little bit clearer that it's more of a belief, I guess. I mean, it says she is pregnant in the painting, and she does have her hand over her abdomen, and it does kind of look as though it is a little bit large. So one of the thoughts that myself and others in the lore community have had is that maybe Naya and Midra were having a stillborn child, and then that kind of brought on their despair at failures to become parents, and Naya told Midra to endure, and he did, but they never really got over it, perhaps. Bloodring says it could just be several vertebrae from an adult spinal column. It doesn't specify if it's a full spinal column. Yeah. And so there is a little bit of that ambiguity, although to be fair, I'm not like crazy familiar with anatomy in spinal columns in Japanese. So there might be some nuance to that that I don't fully grasp without like having to consult both native dictionaries and maybe even like medical dictionaries, which I don't want to do. So anyway, definitely some good comments and questions there.
If these were two different games, if Elden Ring had come out and then 2.5 years later, Shadow of the Erdtree, a separate game had come out, I could square the two. That's fine. It's like, okay, well, it's a different world. Shibuya doesn't matter anymore. But it's not. It's the same world.
Right.
Another good example of that is what you were saying with the Marika Shaman Village stuff. I'm not like hung up on what I thought her origin was. I don't want people to think that, or I don't want people to think that like I'm annoyed that my headcanon was invalidated.
Okay.
But it's like the base.
Yeah, in some ways, I was kind of really excited. I was slightly disappointed that Marika wasn't essentially a Tinkerbell. I really liked that idea, but I'm glad to have like more clarification. I thought the presentation of the Shaman Village was excellent, like we talked about earlier, but I still am scratching my head about like the whole smithing connections, how the Marika hammer was created in the lands of the Newman, but it doesn't actually seem to be related to that. So I'm sure Sophie's about to get to like some similar points as well.
This game, which we talked about, it makes a point of associating Marika and the Newman with the Eternal Cities.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah, you're absolutely right.
It straight up says, like, they are Newman of the Eternal Cities.
It's a rumor, at least in the Japanese.
Yeah.
Marika's scar seals in the Eternal Cities. The roots of the Erdtree are in the Eternal Cities.
Mm-hmm.
I think in 1.0 the scar seal wasn't there, or was it the sword seal? It's really weird because Morgott as Margit 2 outside Langdell had it.
Stuff about like in the ancient past they worshipped horns. Eternal Cities has the people wearing the horned headdresses.
Right.
There's like the Crucible Knights are in the Eternal Cities. You find references to like the roots of the Erdtree where Godwin is buried. They're in the ruins of one of these cities. So it's like, oh yeah, this is the past. Like these cities existed. They were destroyed when they kicked the Greater Will out, but then Marika builds a new world and it literally grows out of their ruins. Mm-hmm. And it's like, yeah, I get it. There's like continuity here. Mm-hmm. Now there isn't, because every significant historical event in this world is now tied to the realm of shadow. Mm-hmm. So like the horned people, the history of like worshipping horns is from the realm of shadow. Marika's origins from the realm of shadow. Like the impact points of they specify that like the stars.
And then also like, why the hell did the ancestral followers not actually follow the Hornsent practices? If the Hornsent were banished as late as the Ray of the Carians joining the forces of the Erdtree, like it's just very vexing.
That brought Meteor was the first star. So the first like Elden thing is in the realm of shadow. Mm-hmm. What it does to the Eternal Cities is like it changes them from being, oh, this is what came before, and like this is the world that like Marika kind of like replaced and overthrew, and she's created like its antithesis. Like the Eternal Cities are all like they're all about like night and stars and silver and the worship of the dead. And then Marika's world's all about like gold and like sunlight and trees and like the worship of life and things like that. Now it's like actually they're just like a random thing. Like I'm saying, if this were a totally separate game, that wouldn't bother me. I don't hate Shaman Village.
Right.
I don't hate the new Marika origin. I don't hate any of that. But this just made part of the base game kind of seem superfluous. Is there anything else you want to talk about before we talk about Mikola?
Yes. Okay, let me do my rapid fire here real quick.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Okay, so here's my my gripes pretty much.
Okay.
I like all of the Sun Realm stuff in the base game.
Right.
Which is very little, but it's very there. And I think that this is taking place in the Sun Realm. all of these things got hella reinforced by the DLC, but not a single one of them got fully confirmed.
Right.
Whether this is the Sun Realm, not fully confirmed. Whether this is the Land of Reeds, not fully confirmed. Whether the Helfen exists somewhere here, not fully confirmed. I lean towards them being all of the above, but if that is true, there should absolutely be more explanation than a couple random enemies with sun shields, because there actually are a couple of beasts in the DLC with the Sun Realm shields, but I'm left oftentimes in this DLC getting excited, opening up an item description, and then being like, oh, I read that before.
Yeah.
Like, I literally read this paragraph before. Like, I just didn't learn anything. So, those moments for me were really disappointing, even though I agree with, like, pretty much everything you said on your positive section. Like, there's so much to love about this. So, I'm kind of torn up. I'm kind of bitter for the moment.
Yeah. Okay, so now I think we need to move on to, like, the most sort of, like, maybe controversial section, which would be, like, what it does to Mikola and then what it does to the various characters who are, like, Mikola adjacent.
Yes.
So we'll start, I think, with, like, Mikola casting away, like, all of his sort of, like, fate and his power and everything, right? Specifically, the way he casts aside Trina. To me, that whole section is, like, what you've done is you've said, okay, Mikola is casting aside, like, the good part of himself, right, who is Saint Trina, because he doesn't want to have to deal with it, right? Obviously, that is presented as this, like, bad thing, heartbreaking tragedy, but it also means that the game itself doesn't need to deal with Saint Trina.
Say more. What do you mean by that?
Mikola is kind of riven with these tensions. Like, Mikola is like an adult who is a child. Mikola is a boy who is a girl. Mikola is like one thing when he is awake, he's another thing when he's asleep.
Right.
Instead of actually dealing with what these tensions are and, like, where this could go, the story is Mikola goes, no, I'm not doing it anymore.
Yeah, I was really interested to see what Saint Trina / Mikola would look like in the dream form when we're told that they are startlingly depicted as an adult, because that's not what Mikola is like. And I really liked a lot of that implication of non-duality that was present in the base game with Mikola and Saint Trina's character, as well as a potential entirely new environment with which we could have interacted with the lore that is just kind of completely washed over and away by the DLC. Maybe it's still there, and maybe they could work with that in some capacity, but honestly, like, they could have done a brand new painted world type thing, which maybe they arguably did with the Shadow Realm, but it feels really contrived, to be quite frank, especially with, like, the way you access it and everything. And the Mikola Saint Trina connection to dreams and the way that dreams and the cosmos are integrated into Bloodborne felt like it could have been right at home in Elden Ring, and it very well might still be, and is a very exciting prospect to me because Bloodborne is obviously one of my favorite games. It's the video game that helped make me start this channel and everything like that. But setting that aside, I'm also a really big fan of the presentation of something like the World of Dreams in fantasy settings, like novels like The Wheel of Time, Teleron Riyadh. And ironically enough, that's kind of what the show is going over right now, if you're keeping current with that. And there's just so much more fun room to play with dreams and identity and the malleable nature of dreams and identities and dreams that we really could have gotten a lot of really, really cool storytelling if they explored that more, in my opinion. So I'm really glad that Sophie brought that up, because I guess, I mean, that's something I definitely knew, but I guess I was so disappointed with other stuff, or maybe not disappointed, dissatisfied with other stuff, that I kind of lost sight of what else we could have had and missed out on. Stella says, lads, is it good to cut out your conscience? Depends. Halo says the Eternal City seemed like a soft reset for the Newman. But the whole thing is if they get sealed after the Shadowlands, then you have to potentially put the grand treason of the Nox pretty late in the timeline, which isn't entirely impossible, but some people think it is probably much, much older, but it's a real mess what they did with the Eternal Cities and the Nox and the Newman.
That's sort of like one thing, but then the game just treats that as an excuse to go, well, now we don't have to deal with it anymore. Like what happens with Saint Trina is he shoves her down a hole.
Yeah.
And then she stays there the whole game. And all she does, like her whole quest line is just her going, can you please kill Mikola?
Kill Mikola.
Yeah, it's that. And it's like, okay, so you've got, like, they do so much Saint Trina stuff in the base game.
Yes.
Like, there is so much built up about Saint Trina.
It was going to be a whole can of worms. I'll give them that.
That's the thing. It's like, I would have preferred them to, like, you have a can of worms here.
Right. Would have been fun.
Get into the core of, like, why Mikola is interesting. Because Mikola's story...
Yeah, could you imagine if, like, the way that Mikola rose to divinity is that he brought the physical world into a dream? Like, if I saw that, the whole Radahn stuff, that would have been completely redeemed for me. It's like, oh, he wants Radahn, or he thinks Radahn's the baddest dude around because he's the strongest demigod? Checkmark. He doesn't have to worry about, like, the physical limitations of Radahn dying because he has a body now. Just plop his soul back in it. Oh, he doesn't want to work with me? Guess what? I believe he wants to work with me, and I'm the god of the dreams. Bam, it just works. The Moog stuff, it kind of just works, but I mean the Moog stuff in the sense of, like, he uses Moog's body for Radahn, but it doesn't really matter. The whole accessing point stuff is a little bit weird, but at least there could have been a stronger connection to dreams if Mikola was dreaming, and then you used Moog, who has a metaphysical connection to Mikola to reach him. So, like, maybe Moog finally reaches him and then you use his blood powers that way, or like Letta figures it out, or hell, even Ansbach. But it sucks that even in the base game, you don't have any indications of Ansbach or the so-called nobility of the Pure Blood Knights. And we called him the Moog Lester for a reason. He beat the allegations, so he got a little bit of redemption, which I wondered if that was the case. And so, while it's almost like the Wario meme, it's like, I've won, but at what cost? So it's just kind of a really big bummer that we don't get that whole dreamscape thing, because that could have done a lot for making the whole alternative path to divinity work for me personally. And even if the Shadow Realms itself is a dream, shoot, guys, maybe that's actually the hidden lore, that it's all a dream. This is Bloodborne 2, after all. It's infinite Tsukiyomi, Madara's plan in Naruto, exactly. You just have, but that one involved the moon, and this one doesn't.
In the DLC is just the story of Mikola getting rid of everything interesting about himself and just becoming another, like, well, I'll save the world, I'm mad with power thing.
Yep.
And it's just like, you literally got, like, the most potentially interesting character in this game, and kind of, like, just made him, like, you've just made him one of the other demigods. And, that has these knock-on effects to the other characters. Like, it retcons Malenia as having, like, she's in on it too.
She's just a tool as well.
Yeah, which, again, like, Malenia has been done, like, so dirty by everything involving this rewritten Mikola plotline.
Yep.
And to be fair, I've always wondered whether or not Malenia, as the blade of Mikola, could have been controlled through her dreams by Mikola, like, literally. Was Malenia serving as Mikola's puppet? And if so, was she doing it willingly? I always thought there was a potential component that she was. Maybe it could have had to do with him trying to stave away the Scarlet Rot by piloting her. I don't know. Of course, like, that idea doesn't work, but was certainly something I considered in the past.
And again, like, for reference, we know that there was, like, a bunch of Mikola quests in the base game.
Right.
So, back in that version of it, Mikola is in the Erdtree, right?
Right.
He's in the Mikola-shaped cocoon
Mhm.
that's in the roots of the Erdtree where Melania is. So when you're fighting Melania, she's guarding Mikola, right?
Yes.
They move Mikola from there to where Moog is, but they leave Melania where she is. So Melania is now guarding nothing, right?
Right.
And it's like, she does say, I'm awaiting his return, but then Melania was in on it the whole time. So, like, Melania, her and Radahn, like, when they were fighting, she's like, Radahn, I'm doing this because basically Mikola's told me to do it, and you're going to be part of Mikola's plan.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, all the stuff about, like, Melania, kind of, they do it through Millicent, where they talk about, like, Melania's, like, inner strength and her sense of self and her sense of dignity and everything is what's let her resist the Scarlet Rot. But now it's like, actually, Melania was just doing what other people told her.
Yeah.
And then there's the Radahn stuff, right?
Yes.
Which is like, again, I'm not having trouble accepting that, like, well, that's not what I thought was going to happen. It's like, Mikola and Radahn, like, I am fairly sure there is literally zero reference to them even acknowledging each other's existence prior to this DLC.
I had no reason to think that they were homies.
Like, they're stepbrothers. Like, obviously,
But Melania, she whispers to him.
there's a familial connection there. Melania scarlet-rotted Radahn.
Right.
So there's kind of like, Mikola's not actually ever really anything to do with Radahn. He's within 1 degree of Radahn, but he's nothing to do with Radahn.
Same with Ranni. Ranni's like the other vector.
And it's like, okay, maybe Radahn talked to you, because we only met Radahn after he'd gone mad from Scarlet Rot.
Right.
But it's just like, what the fuck is up with Godwin now? Because this is like the Eternal City problem all over again. The base game is setting up Mikola and Godwin were very close.
Right.
There are literal statues.
They got a statue together.
of Godwin, like, literally holding Mikola.
Yeah.
And there's, like, the golden epitaph sword that's like, hey, when Godwin died, we made this sword to commemorate his death. And it literally has on it, like, Mikola has made a vow to save Godwin.
Right.
And, like, again, the issue here, I want to be clear, it's not, oh, fuck you for retconning something, you ruined my canon because I don't care about canon. It's like, well, what's the point of the Godwin stuff now? Like, that's still in the game. Before this DLC, when you see that statue in the Erdtree, it's like, oh, there was a closeness here. Like, right, there is something going on here. Now, Mikola wanted Radahn the whole time. This is why, like, I'm saying, like, hey, if this had been a separate game, if this had been Elden Ring 2, and I could just differentiate the two things, fine, but I can't, because all this is happening.
Elden Ring back to the hood. Oh, man. Riffing on the leprechaun.
In the same game that statue is in, that the golden epitaph is in.
Yeah, a lot of hanging chads.
That said, like, I liked Messmer. You don't see much of him, but I like the idea that it's interesting when you read into it that, like, he was literally seemingly he was born with that snake inside him.
Yes, like he was born of the snake being reincarnated.
He was he was born of the snake, and like that's sort of why Marika does that thing to him. It's like a redo of the Morgoth story.
Mm-hmm.
He's like a sort of like shadow of Morgoth in some ways. He's like the mirror of Morgoth, where like Morgoth's born with this like affliction that means he can't be seen. Marika rejects him, but he ends up like, I want to prove myself to my mother. I need to prove that like I could be the Lord. And he's like desperate to preserve the order. Same thing kind of happens to Messmer, where it's like Messmer is born with this serpent, he gets a seal put on him, and Marika like leaves him behind because there's something about him that like makes him unworthy to be Lord. And he does the opposite. He goes full like fuck Marika, and he's like desecrating her statues, and he's like seems to spend all day in this room with a big statue of Marika, just like fuming at her.
So I kind of disagree with that, but I mean, I'm sure this came out pretty much immediately after the thing came out as well. 8 months ago, yeah, July 22nd. So maybe a month, not even like a full month, or ever so slightly longer than a month. And maybe Sophie would just disagree with this take outright. But the way that I look at Mesmer is that the defacing of the Marika statues throughout the realm of shadow is a front, based on the virtue that the gigantic effigy of Marika in his personal chambers is not defaced, literally. So to me, it seems as though he's trying to abide by Marika's will, but then as soon as he realizes that Marika is fine with having a subject that is without grace, that kind of shatters his illusion of what his relationship with Marika is, because if Marika can accept one without grace, but she cannot accept Mesmer, then it shows that the problem wasn't ever the fact that he was graceless. It was something more intrinsic within him that Marika couldn't accept. And so once he understands that he was rejected, he is finally able to reject Marika, which is why he waits to curse her until after the Tarnished defeats him, I think.
And like I think like that's a really interesting parallel to what they do with Morgoth. It's like two different ways to cope with like parental.
So Pixie said it feels more like his men and everyone else lost faith in Marika and defaced the statues, but Mesmer never lost faith until we turn up. So we're told that from a quote that Mesmer wants everyone to place their blame and ire onto him and him alone, and I think he might be doing that to protect the legacy of Marika, despite Grand Am calling her an impudent strumpet. Anyway, I do think that it was deliberately done that the other effigies were defaced and they're all in the Shadow Realm camps. And I think the whole point is that Mesmer is supposed to be a kind of literal scapegoat for Marika to absolve her of the sins of the Crusade. And he went ahead with the plans regardless. But of course, that's just my opinion on things there. Halo, you think the Hornsent defaced the effigies? So the thing is, you even have the defaced effigies within the Shadow Keep itself. And granted, there are some like horned shades within there. There's also the defaced effigy of Marika within the what do you want to call it? The Shadow Keep encampment right outside the Shadow Keep, and I don't think that the Hornsent were enough of a military challenge to Mesmer's forces to deface like literally all of the statues, and they managed to get into the Shadow Keep itself. Because I believe the Marika statue that's even going into the Shaman village is defaced.
Interesting parallel to what they do with Morgoth. It's like two different ways to cope with like parental rejection. I liked Ymir a lot.
Ymir? Which one's that?
Hand guy. The guy who wants to give birth to hands. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Oh my god, that was awesome.
Yeah, in terms of like additions to the story that like I think actually enhance it.
Yeah.
With a few weird exceptions is the Ymir stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So like to get it out of the way,
I'm going to look something up real quick. This might not be the right thing. Dang it, I don't look at the thing there. Nope. I teleported around. Okay, so I don't think I have it saved on my computer because there's a lot of stuff that I didn't label because I didn't feel like I needed. Anyway.
The thing I don't particularly like about the Ymir stuff is that they tie all of the finger creepers and the two fingers to Meteor.
Right.
But like you then start questioning like, well, hang on, why are the finger creepers where they are now? did she go and vomit them out specifically in front of Dung Eater?
I don't think so, but maybe.
But other than that, like, I like the Ymir stuff. I like that it goes into the finger stuff.
To be fair, the line about Metter being the mother of all the fingers and finger creepers could be meant in the Eve sense, in that she's the progenitor of what would go on to become all of the, finger creepers. And so there might not be a contradiction there, but thinking about it from a more literalist perspective is kind of funny, and I didn't think about it. How would Metter even fit into the Leyndell sewers to birth those things? Maybe she was smaller back in the day. Halo, you think everyone stuck there could have started defacing them? I don't know, because we do have some kind of faithful people to Marika there. I don't think a person like Quayline would have tolerated the defacement of the Marika statues. There's like the ghost in the Shadowkeep that's like, oh, surely she hasn't abandoned us. She did.
And it just kind of like, it just sort of like explores the fingers themselves. It gives them an origin, but it's like pretty much the origin that we already assumed they had, which is that like the Greater Will sends these finger messengers to different worlds, and they're like connected to the Greater Will. And what the Ymir stuff it does is it goes into like, yeah, and the fingers are all damaged, and they're damaged because the mother of the fingers that the Greater Will sent was like kind of malformed in some way. And it does an interesting little piece of I think it's deliberate wordplay, where they talk about like, Mikola and this world and everything, they've all been misled, and they're all malformed because of the mother. And because they talk about Marika, before that you're assuming, the Marika, like this is all Marika's fault. And then it actually kind of steps back and it's like, no, when we say the mother, we mean Metia.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment that in Ymir's dialogue, it's supposed to be a reference to the failed mother of fingers, which is why he wants to become the new mother of fingers, which is, who knows, maybe him smoking too much of the fungi within the realm of shadow.
The thing that's actually kind of instructed Marika was itself malformed. So, like, I like that they go into that extra detail. I think it's really cool. And I like that, I like the Ymir stuff a lot. I like that he is a Karian sorcerer, but he's sort of just open about like, look, it's not about the moon, it's not about the stars, it's just about whatever happens to be in the sky. I found a better celestial body that's not a moon, that's not a star, it's just the Greater Will's weird finger thing. I'm following that now. And the way that like Ymir's like, and I'm going to perfect it. You made a mistake, but I'm going to fix it. I'm going to do this properly. I'm going to like do all this weird body horror shit to try to grow fingers out of my own body. It references, like, you don't see it, but it references that, like, the reason Ymir is wearing that robe is under his robe there is all these, like, weird squirming fingers all over his body, which is, like, awesome. Like, that's really, really cool. It does more of the, like, male-female duality stuff by having, like, it's Ymir. He's always referred to as a man, but his goal is to be a mother and to give birth.
And the moon has always been super feminine in Soul's canon.
Yeah, it's like, I really like the Ymir stuff.
So cool.
Anything else you wanted to add?
One of the ones you didn't mention that was somewhat invalidated or put into question is probably how I would actually put it, because I don't think it's totally invalidated, but I wrote, what does Ranni mean to the storyline of Radon and Mikola? Let me just read what I wrote. She has vague ties to both Mikola and Saint Trina in like her sleep spells and her having Torrent and the spirit calling Bell. And there's also a lot of spirit calling Saint Trina, like overlapping imagery. So there's tons of stuff there, right? And she even has a voice line directly designed to be a foil of Mikola's first line when hugging you. He says, I promise you 1,000-year voyage guided by compassion, But Ranni says the exact opposite. She says, 1,000-year voyage guided by doubt and loneliness. I love this juxtaposition. I think it's so cool.
Miquella's got 4 arms in the ending as well.
Right. Exactly. But if this is to be significant, why are none of the Black Knife assassinations brought up in the DLC? We get literally 0 new information about Ranni.
Yeah, it's like...
And as I bring this up all the damn time, it's also very frustrating to me that Miquella's path to divinity seems completely at odds with Ranni's path to pseudo-divinity. Is Ranni even technically a god in that ending? If we're supposed to be a lord, we presumably need a god to do so, and she does kind of absorb Marika within herself. This is just kind of a special spectral power that one needs to lose their bodies to obtain. That might be part of it, but then, like, why does Ranni's allegedly failed Black Knife ritual allow her to succeed in that, whereas Miquella failed before? And then, of course, we still have some lingering questions from the base game, like, why the hell was only Ranni's fingers alive until she murked him, whereas everybody else's were aged and unresponsive? Yeah, and why does Ranni not need the gate?
And also, like, the finger-slaying blade, you'd think was, like, this is going to matter at some point, given that we now have, like, the Mother of Fingers. And I've seen people theorize, like, oh, yeah, well, the finger-slaying blade was used to harm Martyr when Martyr was in the Eternal Cities. And I'm like, okay, but...
Maybe.
Yeah, it's like, but, like, when, like, you have to invent so many off-screen, like, things to make that work.
And then, of course, like, why would Martyr have been in the Eternal Cities if that was that belief? Although I don't think most people believe that Martyr would have been down there, or maybe down there is a wrong word to say, like, in the Eternal City. Because many people believe she would have been Placidusax's god, but... yeah, just trying to square Placidusax and the Elden Ring there, plus Martyr and the Golden Beast, and being the first star into the Lands Between is also a headache to consider. And I was just very shocked that the Martyr stuff was stated so matter-of-factly and so plainly, and we didn't even get the typical "it is said" in the FromSoftian dialogues. Hey, Philanthropist, nice to see you again. Miquella has phantom limbs. Ranni has phantom face. Well, Ranni has, puppet limbs, and she does have 4 arms, like Saint Trina and Sophie had mentioned a moment ago. Halo says, it almost seems like Ranni not having a body means she simply can't be a vessel for the Greater Will's way of using the Elden Ring. And we also have unresolved questions brought up with Martyr and the Microcosm as to whether or not the Greater Will is even there. Obviously, we had some lingering doubts in the base game with the way that the Round Table Hold 2 fingers stayed upright and still for the remainder of the game. But the fact that it is called a void, and the way that Lusat and Azur had their minds broken by a void, which is like the death of a galaxy or something along those lines, does bring up extra doubts with all of this as well.
Yeah.
And when I was making DLC predictions, I was totally fine with not having quote unquote enough evidence.
Yeah.
But now that I'm evaluating the whole game, and I'm like basically going to be writing my more like official essay, so to speak, and less guessing. Now I just feel stupid bringing up half of my my theories because, like, I think they all got reinforced by the DLC. One of my theories is that Radahn is an Albinauric, and lots of lore people early on brought that up.
Yeah.
They got even closer to saying Marika is a golem created by the Eternal Cities. Right. But they did not say either of those two things at all. Yeah. I cannot sit here and put up a video and be like, yeah, guys, that's probably what happened because I have this and this proof. Because I don't. Yeah. All I have is like some hints that maybe they wanted to go in that direction, but they didn't do it.
I think.
And I did like the way that Saint Trina just phrased that right there. They wanted to go in that direction, but they didn't do it. I feel like that's almost the perfect encapsulation of the Nox lore in a nutshell, because when I look at what happened to a character like Saint Trina or even Miquella in the cut content of the base game, and the whole thing about abundance and decay kind of being retconned. What's to say the same thing didn't essentially happen to the Nox despite everything?
I think my final word on it is like, it works really well as a totally standalone game.
Yes.
But unfortunately, it's DLC for a game that already exists. And attempting to like make the two fit together, it's like these puzzle pieces don't actually properly lock in now. You know, like I was saying, Dark Souls 2 and Dark Souls 3 change a lot of things about Dark Souls 1, but crucially, they remain self-contained entities.
Right.
You can play through Dark Souls 3 without acknowledging Dark Souls 1. You can play through Dark Souls 1 without acknowledging Dark Souls 3. You can play through Dark Souls 2 without acknowledging either.
Yeah, a lot of people do.
You can just accept that, like, the stuff in Dark Souls 2 where they reference back to Lordran, that's just because that happened historically. It's not really any weirder than, like, when Dark Souls 1 references, like, Thorland or somewhere else you never go.
Mm.
And like another big difference between the Dark Souls games is that there's enough time and distance placed between the characters that it's diegetic, that they've kind of forgotten the history of the world, and that gives you an extra layer of skepticism to apply to what you're told through not only the characters, but also the beliefs that are stated within the item descriptions. You know that you might not be getting that full story, whereas a lot of people who are new to FromSoft games might not have that kind of a basis for skepticism when looking and evaluating Elden Ring's items because of the way that things work. And since Shadow of the Erdtree doesn't really connect into the base game at all, it is it does leave me feeling a little bit high and dry at times. So, like, obviously within, like, the last week, we've been going over a lot of subjects relating to things. And, you know, over a year after this game has released, and almost a year for, like, the DLC on top of it, it still feels like we're almost no closer to some of, like, the most fundamental facts about what should be the timeline, which is just kind of astonishing, to be honest. Shadow of the Erdtree is like Dev saying, want to see this other way we could have taken the story, even though it's not really related to the OG content? Then watch us make Night Rain. Halo says, it could be that becoming a god just means you seize control over the Elden Ring's form. How you do it is irrelevant, maybe. Marika being a vessel, Ranni just dispersing it, Miquella by the God Gate, etc. I still feel like Miquella with the God Gate says nothing about an interaction with the Elden Ring whatsoever. Like, sure, he would need to kill us, but then, like, what does he do? Does he go back and get the Elden Ring to become God squared? It's very strange. Like, we're told from Ansbach that Marika used the gate to become a god, but crucially, we don't know when, why, or even how she became a god. Like, if it happened at the beginning of her reign, she may have done it with Godfrey. And then how does that work? How does Sarash fit into all this other than, you know, fitting into Godfrey's back? Or even Radagon, because Radagon is technically part of Marika. Was he always part of Marika? Did he become split from her? We have those unresolved questions, which does seem actually distinct from the way that Miquella and Trina have to interact with the gates, but we just don't have that information either. And then, of course, if we are being slightly misdirected and Marika became a bona fide god later in the timeline after Godfrey's marriage with her came to an end, then did she become the one true god of the lands between when she merged with Radagon? And is that when the Golden Order started? And that's why this whole propaganda campaign came into effect after everything, and why Goldmask and Corrin are so shocked? I do think that's a distinct possibility as well, which is absolutely wild that in the span of a couple sentences, we could say, yeah, Marika could have become a god with Godfrey, or she could have become a god with Radagon, and there's like a cover-up operation to say that she was always god from the beginning, which makes parsing through all of this stuff even more difficult.
But the problem is, like, they actually have to occupy the same physical and narrative space now. So it's just like these two things don't really match anymore. If you said you have to play through Elden Ring again or Shadow of the Erdtree again, I'd definitely play through Shadow of the Erdtree again, I think, on a design level and in terms of like the encounters, and there's like there's so many different kinds of weapons they add that are all really cool. They knocked it out of the park on that. Like it was I had a really great time playing Shadow of the Erdtree. If you watch my Elden Ring playthrough, you can see there's parts of that where I'm clearly getting a little frustrated and bored that it like some of those fights are dragging on.
Right.
The game doesn't seem to want to end. It's like stacking like end area upon end area, whereas that never happened in Shadow of the Erdtree. But at the end of the day, I just sort of squinting and turning my head slightly at a lot of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's our Shadow of the Erdtree response.
That was great. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you too. Do you want to just plug your social media before we call it a night?
Yeah, absolutely. Don't forget, I'm releasing a video game this year, Hysteria RPG. We're going to release an alpha on Steam. Come find it on my YouTube channel. We'll link it for you in the description.
Yep. That's like a 3D. I saw you playing part of it. It's like a 3D, like kind of open worldy RPG on an island or something.
Yes. Well, it's actually in a bog, but it's gonna be like we're trying to release the alpha this year, but then we'll have like probably another year or two of development after that. So there's gonna be like a pretty extensive story and world.
That sounds great. Yeah. Cool. Okay, so thank you very much. And we'll probably talk again if we want to discuss something else from the DLC.
I think I want to go gender.
All right, so I enjoyed that. I was very glad to have some of their perspectives on Mikola and Trina. It does not surprise me that they were disappointed with what happened with that. But anyway, I was very interested to see how much I disagreed with Sophie on a lot of our interpretations, but our impressions of certain areas and bosses with the DLC. I did not expect that. So anyway, this is the link to Saint Trina's lore channel. We've covered a couple videos by her in the past. And obviously this is going to be the video that we just watched now. If you want to give Sinclair, Lore, and Sophie some love for releasing this. So I did talk to Saint Trina a little bit before the stream, and they said that they really haven't been releasing a lot of content for Shadow of the Erdtree and the Elden Ring in general because they're focused on, creating their video game. Slackers. So that makes sense there. And then, of course, Sinclair Lore is pretty prolific with their videos on Bloodborne, Katakyo Hitman Reborn, and a bunch of other stuff like cryptology and things like that. Or not cryptology, cryptozoology and stuff like that. So anyway, I enjoyed myself. I hope you guys did as well. So that'll be it for tonight's stream. Hopefully I'll catch you on the next one, again at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll need to figure out what I want to watch. What's his name? Elden Dork did contact me, and he said he wanted to potentially hash over some things in the video of his that we watched the other day. So we might need to hammer some things out, and we might get into that probably not tomorrow, maybe the day after that, or even beyond. So we might have like a little bit of a podcast type discussion thing in the future, or, we'll see. We'll hammer out the details in the near future. So stay posted for that as well. So anyway, once again, I want to thank you all for joining me. I do appreciate that. Hopefully I'll catch you on the next one. So until then, take care, stay safe. Last Protagonist out.